Greetings from the new Simply Hearing. Like everyone, we've made a lot of changes. We've always loved telling you about the teamwork and rapport that you find here, but now, for the sake of medical safety, we offer 4 types of services by appointment only. There's lots to be happy about with a new, more precise appointment plan made just for your needs. We also have a new, more transparent pricing structure. Start your path for better hearing and better life.
Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce.
The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
Hi, I'm Bob from Crane Appliance. Since 1983, as a family-owned company, our goal has been simple: to give our neighbors of the Cape and Islands a great shopping experience. Rest easy knowing our professional team will listen to your needs and help you pick out the perfect appliances. We'll take care of everything throughout the sale, delivery, and installation process. And we even have our own in-house service department. Crane Appliance, we call the Cape and Islands home.
Carlson Printing for all your printing needs. 508-548-7303 or toll free at 1-800-696-7303. Our email address is carlsonprinting@aol.com. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs.
Hosting services for fctv.org are provided by MegaNet Communications. MegaNet offers a wide array of internet services including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server colocation, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their #1 goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or meganet.net.
Provisions of the open meeting law, General Law 38, Section 20, relating to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency. The August 9th, 2021 public meeting of the Falmouth Select Board shall be physically closed to the public to avoid group congregation. Alternative public access to this meeting shall be provided in the following manner. The meeting will be televised via Falmouth Community Television. Real-time public comment can be addressed to the Select Board utilizing the Zoom virtual meeting software for remote access. This application will allow users to view the meeting and send a comment or question to the chair via the chat function. However, we're modifying that to the governor's new orders, which have indicated the correct method to use is to use the raise hand function. So if you raise your hand, then you'll be promoted to speak during public comment. And we would like you to speak rather than us reading the chats. It's going to be more appropriate and correct to have the people come forward and actually make their own comments. We'll be doing that tonight. And the login instructions are on the meeting link for this specific meeting, can be found at the following web address. It's http://www.falmouthma.gov/BOS for Board of Selectmen. Please plan on 10 or 15 minutes of preparation time to log in, although you won't have that much time now. Additional public comments may be sent in advance of the meeting. I don't think we need to read everything on these paragraphs, do we? That's enough. Okay, so I'm calling this meeting to order. And if you would all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I noticed that there is a chat comment that you might want to.
Thank you. Okay, I see a comment from Sharon Bonstra at 65 Peterson Road. Ms. Bonstra, if you would be willing to, we can take some time and give you a moment to get on, but if you could raise your hand and Mr. Shanahan will promote you to speak.
I think, Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I think, oh, here she is. Okay. It sounded like we would have the option if someone chose not to do that, that we could read it, but we should make sure they knew that they could also make, we would promote them over.
Okay, well, we're a little bit early. I'm sorry. We're going to just couple more things and we'll get right to your public comment, okay? The two things are, the first is a recognition, and I'd like to recognize the passing of Liam Mcguire from Liam Mcguire's Irish Pub on Main Street. He was an integral part of our business community, and he and his wife Deb have been instrumental in bringing a real piece of Ireland to Falmouth, and I really appreciate that. And my condolences, and I think that of the board would go out to the Mcguire family tonight and wish them the best during this difficult time. And so are there any other announcements or comments? Yes.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick announcement. The Woods Hole Partnership Education Program interns are in Woods Hole for a week, and tomorrow is their symposium down in Redfield Auditorium at Huey from 9:30 to 2. And since we're conveniently on Zoom, if it's acceptable, I could put a link to that in the chat if people want to see what the symposium is about and how to register to watch it on Zoom or how to see it in person.
I think that would be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements from the board or staff? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your patience, Ms. Bonstra. Did I say your name right?
Very close, thank you. My name is Sharon Boonstra.
Okay.
And I live at 65, I moved, I guess, 65 Peterson Road in Falmouth.
And before you get going, I just want to make sure this is not relating to anything that's actually on the agenda. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. I did see an item close to what I'm talking about, so.
Okay.
But I think the appropriate time to be during public comment, and then you can.
Okay, our policy is to not involve things that are on the agenda, and if it is something that's on the agenda, you will have a chance to speak during that time. So.
Okay. It is related to COVID-19, so.
I don't, Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't think that we're just talking about COVID-19, sort of writ large. I don't think we're talking about a mask policy. So I think if at your discretion, I think it fits within public comment.
I would agree. Yes, Nancy?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it seems to be a specific request or idea. So it seems appropriate.
Okay, very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. And first, I do want to thank you all for your hard work on the select board. I know it's a lot of work and it can be a very thankless job. So thank you so much, all of you, for all the work you put in. I would like to request that the select board consider implementing an indoor mask mandate following the lead of other towns, including Provincetown and Wellfleet and some other towns in Massachusetts that are in high-risk counties as we are. I spoke to the manager today at Windfall Market, where I regularly do my grocery shopping. And I've noticed most of their customers, including me and my husband, have started wearing masks again. So I asked if they would please consider requiring their employees to also wear masks. He stated it's too hard to require his employees to wear masks without a mandate from the town or the state. Given that Falmouth is in a high-risk county, I would just like to ask that the select board follow the CDC guidance and require masks indoors. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it. And so we don't really reply to public comment, but we just note it and take it up at a later date.
Okay,
Okay,
very much. Appreciate it.
yeah, thank you. And I think we had somebody else that wanted to make public comment. I did get a note earlier from Karen Bissonette that she.
Yes.
She's here.
It looks like she's here, as is Alan Robinson,
Okay.
who has also asked to make public comment.
All right. Good evening.
Hi. Thank you so much. I will try to be brief. I wrote it down so I would be brief.
Your volume's very low.
Yeah. Karen, I can't hear you.
Oh, all right. Let me see if I can do something about that. I apologize. Microphone, hold on.
Well, should we let Alan go ahead and then we'll come
Let
back?
Alan go and I'll try to figure this out. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Welcome, Alan.
Thanks, Doug. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you and good evening all. My name is Alan Robinson and I'm a resident of the town of Falmouth. I wish to bring to the board's and the administration's attention that the town meeting approved bylaw banning the commercial sales of single-use plastic water bottles in sizes smaller than 1 gallon goes into effect on September 1st, 4 weeks from today. Recently, in speaking with members of our community, I've learned there is little awareness of the upcoming ban. Perhaps explaining this, and to my knowledge, there has been no messaging about this to the general community by the administration or the select board. My concern, and I think it should be your concern, is that it is very possible that come the 1st of September, there will be many surprised and shocked shoppers at our markets, convenience stores, and restaurants. I urge you to direct the administration to make a concerted effort via appropriate messaging media, town website, FCTV, posters, community associations, and other means to get the word out before September 1st. To this end, and as a start, the Department of Public Works and Solid Waste Advisory Committee have partnered in drafting a poster. We intend to display the poster for the first time at Saturday's Falmouth Walk. And I'll ask right now if that poster, which I did send in by email, is available to post on the screen.
I'm not aware of that, I'm sorry.
Okay, hearing none, let me just very quickly read it. It will say goodbye to commercial sales of single-use plastic water bottles. There'll be an image of a water bottle with one of those circles and lines through it, the no. Effective September 1, 2021, per vote of Falmouth Town Meeting. Keep our community clean. Use refillable water bottles. I recognize you can't discuss or comment at this time, but I do hope that you, the board, and the administration will take action to get the message out about this major change to a lot of people very quickly, and certainly before September 1st and beyond September 1st. Thank you.
Okay, Alan, thanks. I'll follow up with an email to explain what has been happening that you might not be aware of.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Again, I have. Can you guys hear me now?
Still weak, but if you get close to the mic, it's probably good enough.
I will try. I think no one's ever had trouble hearing me before because I don't know. So, anyway, I just want to comment on the meeting that you had last time, and you talked about the ARPA funds. And I was surprised to see, because I read it in the paper, that there was no discussion about a community housing when you discussed this. And clearly we have a housing crisis that has been exacerbated by the pandemic. And according to Cape and Islands Realty Association, median price house in Falmouth prior to COVID was $439,000, and in May of 2021, it was $730,000. And it's never been so critical to have affordable housing for those that we need to be in this community. Those of us who were at the housing roundtable that the governor did a couple of weeks ago heard him talk about ARPA, and that the funds were a great opportunity for housing. And that specifically he talked about home ownership and putting roots down, and that this would affect the future of work, quote unquote, in our community. And that there needs to be flexibility with local government, and that he feels too that local politics and process will be a problem. And he also stated that in many communities, the opposition is assaulting on affordable housing. That with the ARPA money funds, towns have an unusual opportunity, he said, quote unquote, because towns have discretionary funds now. He went on to say that we need appropriate housing for everyone. He also said that at another venue, not in Falmouth, that he would like to see 20%. Can you still hear me?
I'm listening closely.
Okay, sorry, because you went away from me. That he would like to see 20% of the funds used for housing, and that what I'm asking you to do is to commit 20% of our ARPA money to housing. Clearly, this is a topic that needs more discussion, and I realize you did discuss wastewater as far as being the recipient of these funds, but I do not believe that our wastewater issues are because of the pandemic, and clearly housing is. And the last thing I will say is a quote from the Cape Cod Times that the governor made is that the lieutenant governor and I love the town of Falmouth, but if we don't do something more than we've done, whether it be senior housing, downtown housing, workforce housing, affordable housing, and also put some serious elbow grease into home ownership, we're simply never going to get to where we need to get to if we want to make this a place where people of regular and modest means can find a way to put a stick in the ground and make a living and make a life. So I thank you all. I cannot see you because for some reason I went away. But I thank you all, and I know you can't discuss this, but I hope you will discuss it at another meeting, and that maybe you would get the Affordable Housing Committee involved in this as well. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And do we have anybody else waiting to make public comment?
I don't see anyone else in the chat, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Then we'll move on to our regular agenda, which is summary of actions, administrative orders. The first is to approve a petition to install an Eversource petition to install one 3-inch conduit and one handhole number 56-H4A on Katomet Street. This work is to be done to private electric service for customer at 31 Katomet Street.
Chairman, I move approval based on recommendations from town staff.
Very well.
Second.
And that sounds good. All in favor? By roll call, Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
And Brown, aye. Thank you. Next is vote to award a lease of 300 Dillingham Ave to Joe Q Veterans Coffee Break Incorporated. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I can speak to that briefly if you like.
Thank you.
So as the board is aware, at your direction, we issued a request for proposals soliciting interest from nonprofit organizations to provide services for veterans, to operate a veterans service center at the former senior center at 300 Dillingham Avenue. We received one proposal in response to that open solicitation. That proposal was reviewed by a committee appointed by the town manager. And I'm happy to report it was a very strong proposal from Joe Q Veterans Coffee Group, and we are recommending award of a lease.
And if there's no questions from the board, I'd entertain first a motion to approve for discussion. If anyone's willing to do so.
So move.
Patterson, second.
Well, so I have one question I'd like to ask, and Mr. Johnson-Staub, maybe you would be the one to address this. I noticed that the lease calls for a $4,000 a year rent. And I was surprised to see that because I thought the original intent was just a simple, like a $1 lease, just to let them get started with the least amount of overhead.
So we issued a request for proposals that called for the individuals or the entities responding to submit a price proposal. And the price proposal that was submitted by Joe Q was $4,000. They were not required to do that. That was their proposal.
I see.
Now, we did have in the RFP criteria, and it was very clear that the award was not based on price alone. There were 5 criteria that we looked at as outlined in the memo to the board. But one of the 5 criteria was price. And so, you know, presumably they chose to get the highest rating that they could get under the terms of the RFP by submitting a $4,000 price proposal.
Expecting that they would have competition. Exactly. Okay,
Perhaps.
thank you.
I
Yes.
would just, I see Ms. English Braga has her hand up, but if I could just add one other thing, under the terms of the lease, the town is responsible for repairing, for any major repairs to the utility systems, the heat, the mechanical, heat, electrical, sewer connection, et cetera. So there will be some ongoing costs to the town.
Okay, yes, Ms. English Braga. Oops, you're muted now. There you go.
I just wanted, I'm sorry, we froze for a minute. I just was going to reiterate if I could, and I think you've said it once, Doug, and so is Peter, we only got one proposal. So just so people understand that, we put that call out, but this was the only one that came in. And then the second piece is exactly to Peter's last comment, which is, even though it wasn't required, I mean, that money is, it's not a new building, it's an older building. It is going to require some upkeep. And so it is phrase some of the costs that the town will undertake in doing work to keep this building as it needs to be.
Any other thoughts on that from other board members?
Well, it seems like a kind of a hefty rental fee for a service organization. So I don't know whether we can consider reducing that in the future.
Is it possible that we have discretion to reduce that? I mean, I don't want to be unfair to other people who didn't bid, but nobody else bid, so.
Is it $4,000 a year?
It is.
Oh, $4,000 a year.
A year, yeah.
Which isn't a lot.
No, I think Sam had heard it as a month.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think $4,000 a year is a reasonable rent.
I agree.
Okay. Are there any other questions or concerns about the lease or the wording? All right, well, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to take a roll call vote. Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
And Brown, aye.
Congratulations and thank you.
Yes, congratulations, and I'm glad we finally got this thing rolling.
Yes.
Okay, the next item would be approve request to refinance affordable home mortgage, 150 Cloverfield Way, East Falmouth. That's all we have here. Any questions from the board? Is there a motion to approve?
I would move approval.
Second.
All those in favor, Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
And Brown, aye. Thank you. The next is vote to expend $500 from the Beach Department donation account for the Dr. David Garber Dare to Be Great Award given to a lifeguard during the annual banquet.
I move approval.
Second.
Very good. All those in favor, Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
And Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye. Sorry, I had to blow my.
Okay. And Brown, aye. Next is vote to accept donation from New England Endurance Events in the amount of $1,900 to the Beach Department donation account.
So moved.
Patterson, second.
All those in favor, Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
And Brown, aye. And
Could I
thank you
just
for
mention,
that.
I mention that because it might not be obvious that the New England endurance events is actually the group that sponsors the triathlons, of which I think there are 3 this year here that there are some, hosted here in Falmouth, and then there are some other locations where they host the same kind of triathlon.
Right. Thank you. And that's a very generous gift, $1,900. So thanks very much to them. Appreciate that. Next is a vote to approve Conservation Department application to Mass Wildlife Habitat Management grant for continued invasive plant management and prescribed burn at the Quinnemessa Fields area. We got a very nice description of what the work is that they're doing in our packet. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And
Motion to approve.
Patterson, second.
okay. And all those in favor, Ms. Taylor,
Taylor, I.
Ms. Patterson,
Patterson, aye.
Ms. English Braga,
English Braga, aye.
Ms. Scott Price,
Price, aye.
Brown, aye. Thanks to the Conservation Department for getting that program going. It sounds like it's really working out well. Up next is authorize a letter of support for proposed expansion of existing Bourne landfill. We did have some information in our packet, and the town of Bourne is looking to expand and continue their permit. And they were wondering if we could support that. And we do bring our trash there. Municipal waste, we're the only town that has a contract with them. So I think it would be in our interest to support them.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may, I was just going to say, we regularly hear that curbside pickup is really, as rare as it is in most communities now. It's one of the services that we have in Falmouth that is, really valued. And one of the ways that is possible is because we're just delivering to, a landfill that's close enough that, our contracted waste management company can, manage that for a price that, we're going to be negotiating that again soon, but for a price that the town can afford. So I think we are, very deeply connected to the fate of that particular landfill. And the idea that it could, possibly extend its life to, I think it had said 2040, that's significant because the discussion for a while was that we were running up against a very short timeline. And the options after that, are few, and they include a lot of, much more transportation, which of course means much more price and really perhaps a reworking of this service that I think is very valuable. I think people who haven't lived in other communities don't realize that, the tax base is absorbing this for everyone. And, whereas in other communities, when you have pay as you go and individuals have to contract or get to the dump, pay for those stickers, take time out of work, it is a very inequitable system for residents in those communities. And so this, I think, is just one of those cherished services that we have. And so I definitely want to support Bourne in their efforts.
I agree. Just to be clear, I don't think that just that because we support this and just because they may get extended, doesn't guarantee us that they're still going to accept our trash, but at least it gives us hope that maybe we can work out a deal.
Yes, an option.
Okay, so is there a motion to send the letter of support? I don't know if we had that.
I move approval.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor, Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, I.
Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
And Brown, aye.
Thank you.
Next is vote to accept donation from Falmouth Road Race Incorporated in the amount of $3,750 to the Beach Department donation account.
Motion to approve.
Patterson, second. With gratitude.
Definitely.
Thank you, Sam.
Falmouth Road Race are so dependable. Whenever anybody needs anything, they just help. So all those in favor, Taylor?
Taylor, I.
Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
And Brown, aye. And definitely gratitude to the road race again. Thank you. And next is a vote to expend $3,750 from the Beach Department donation account to fund the Beach Department's annual staff awards banquet on Tuesday, August 17th.
Move to approve.
Oh, good. Second.
Okay, thank you. And all those in favor, Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, I.
Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
And Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
And Brown, aye.
That's how money is in my house too. It comes in and it's there for about 1 second before it has to go out for something, so.
I know that feeling.
Well, certainly we should be grateful for all of the beach staff that support our,
Yes.
the access to our beaches and keeping safe.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
It's a great event. I've been to it before a couple times. It's really nice. So special events, new recommended. We have 3 beach wedding ceremonies. And the first is Hazelton and Bird at Minot Beach, Saturday, August 21st, 2021. Do we want to do all 3 or individually?
I think we should do all 3 because we got basically an endorsement from staff for all 3.
They're all identical endorsements.
With the exception, Mr. Chair, of just a reminder from Mr. Mcguire that they can't be over in the area near where that, the bridge is, because that area obviously isn't safe.
The old wooden bridge, yes.
Yes.
That is a condition for that first one at Minot Beach. And the other 2 are at Old Silver Beach. One is on Saturday, August 28th, 2021, and the next one is on Sunday, October 10th, 2021.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor, Ms. Taylor,
Taylor, I.
Mr. Patterson,
Patterson, aye.
Ms. English Braga,
English Braga, aye.
Ms. Scott Price.
Scott Price, aye.
Thank you. And Brown, aye. Next is a vote to adopt stormwater management rules and regulations, 15-minute. And I want to comment that the posting for this was done in the newspaper, and I'll read that. But I want to comment that it was my suggestion that we hold this meeting remotely, kind of a little bit at the last minute. The County Assembly Delegates meeting was in full remote last week. That prompted me to send a message to Mr. Suso saying that maybe we should be following suit with Cape Cod being so in the red. We were out of the red for so long. So now we're in it, but not so much really in Falmouth. Talked to Scott McGann about it, and he had the feeling that we were doing better than a lot of areas of the Cape. But nonetheless, here we are. And so the notice in the newspaper was Friday, July 16th. This is to the Falmouth Select Board under the authority of the Falmouth Home Rule Charter, section C3-7, subsection H of the Code of the Town of Falmouth will hold a public hearing to establish and adopt stormwater management rules and regulations for the Town of Falmouth. The hearing will be held on Monday, August 9th, 2021 at 7:30 p.m. in the Selectmen's Board, Select Board Meeting Room, Town Hall, 59 Town Hall Square. And that's why I mentioned the late change of venue. But according to most of our experts, we're still in the right because we did post the meeting as being on Zoom. However, we'll go with discussion tonight, and then we'll wait on voting until we've maybe a couple weeks when we come back to this, in case there's anybody that had hoped to attend the meeting at Town Hall. This is our only public hearing tonight, I believe, so we'll delay the vote, and that will keep us from causing any harm. Okay, thank you. So I think Mr. McLaughlin is here to address this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Welcome.
Jim, I think Jim has a PowerPoint, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Feel free to go ahead and share if
Yes,
you're ready.
Mr. Chairman. James McLaughlin, Town Engineer. And if we could also add to the meeting or promote to the meeting as a panelist, Nick Christofori from CEI.
Okay.
Who put together a PowerPoint presentation. Good evening, I'm James McLaughlin, Town Engineer, and this evening we're seeking adoption of stormwater regulations that are required by our MS4 permit with Mass DEP and EPA. We have with us tonight Nick Christofori from CEI. They're a consulting firm that represents a number of Massachusetts communities with stormwater compliance and MS4 compliance. And in particular on the Cape, they also represent Dennis, Yarmouth, Barnstable, and Sandwich. So they have some capabilities that, because the Cape is somewhat unique in terms of our drainage systems and the availability of sand to infiltrate a lot of our stormwater. They have a lot of experience in MS4 compliance on the Cape. And the plan tonight is for Nick to just go through the PowerPoint presentation on the regulations, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions. This is, as I mentioned, a requirement for our MS4 permitting, and it's something that is long overdue from our perspective in terms of getting it on the books. So without any further ado, I just ask Nick if he could share his screen and go through the presentation.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, Jim. Thank you very much. So I will hopefully share my screen now. I think you guys can all see this. Yeah, so again, we are Comprehensive Environmental. My name is Nick Cristofori from CEI, and we've been working with the town of Falmouth on meeting a number of these requirements over the last 3 years or so now. So we're actually in year 4 of this multi-year permit so far. And one of the reasons why you probably haven't heard too much about the permit so far is that thus far, engineering and Department of Public Works have been really bearing the brunt of all these permit requirements and regulations, because it's really been focused on things such as cleaning catch basins and inspecting stormwater outfalls and cleaning streets and stuff like that. So more focused on implementation of things that are actually in the field. However, tonight I'm going to talk briefly, real quickly, about a very high level about what's required from a regulatory piece and regulatory updates that the town is needing to make. And as Jim alluded to, every other community that's regulated under MS4 on the Cape, which is, I believe, is the entire Cape. It may exclude, say, Truro or something like that, but certainly the bigger communities on the Cape are subject to the NIPD's MS4 permit, which brings me to my presentation. So this permit is regulated under EPA's Clean Water Act. It dates back all the way to 1972. And what is NIPD's MS4? Well, it is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit. Well, what is it really? Well, it's a series of regulations that regulates pollutant discharges into water bodies via the town's drainage system. And pollutants are anything from, say, sediment from construction sites to sewage and septic tank illicit connections that can, basically anything that can be tying into the town's drainage system, which then eventually flows downhill and can cause pollution to water bodies. So way back, there was phase 1, which only regulated communities of greater than 100,000 people in 1990. And in Massachusetts, this only covered Boston and Worcester. But back in 1999, the original phase 2 permit came out, and this regulated communities of over 1,000 people within somewhat close proximity to Boston and Worcester within Massachusetts. So this pulled in something like 250-ish communities that are now regulated under these particular sets of regulations. And the thing I always throw out there, because everyone always comments on it, this is an unfunded mandate. This is a series of regulations that is coming down from EPA. The communities are having to bear the burden of implementation and funding that the government is not providing any funding for. So real quick, the MS4 permit, there are 6 what they call minimum control measures. The first couple are public education and outreach. The last one has to do with good housekeeping, pollution prevention, which is I talked briefly about earlier, that really is related to Department of Public Works. So making sure catch basins are clean, streets are swept, et cetera, et cetera. And the 3 things we'll touch on briefly tonight are 3, 4, and 5, which is the illicit discharge detection and elimination requirements, the construction site requirements, and the post-construction stormwater requirements. And these are what's really driving some of these regulatory pieces. So there are 3 regulatory mechanisms or 3 regulatory components that the town is having to address. And the town, I believe, has incorporated everything into one single document, which is the subject of tonight's meeting. So the very first item is the illicit discharge detection and elimination. And basically all this particular regulation says is it prohibits non-stormwater discharges from the town's stormwater system. So basically it says the only thing that can be in your stormwater drainage system is stormwater. And if it's something else that has a contaminant in it, it allows the town to prohibit those contaminants and also require the removal of this connection by whoever is at fault. So it's really the focus of this primary regulatory mechanism is to give communities the regulatory teeth to require whoever's committing the offense to remove it on their dime rather than the town having to foot the bill for removing these things. And certainly if anyone has any questions while I'm going through this, please feel free to interrupt. Just it's sometimes easier to do questions while we're going rather than at the end. So if anyone does have questions, please let me know. The two other regulatory mechanisms do kind of go together. The first is the requiring erosion and sediment controls, making sure they're in place during construction, so during a construction project. A couple other things that go along with it, making sure that plans for the construction project are reviewed before the project commences, before construction starts. Also outlines when site inspections during construction are supposed to happen and by who, and also requiring the use of LID, which is low impact development control. So making sure that things such as reducing impervious cover and impervious pavement are looked at in some capacity to try and minimize as much as possible the environmental pollution that could be happening as part of this construction. And the third piece is post-construction. So post-construction is that once a project has been constructed, how is stormwater properly being handled? And for the most part, this ties directly to the Massachusetts stormwater standards in the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook. The other thing is it also requires new development and redevelopment to treat for total suspended solids and also phosphorus. So making sure that you're installing certain structural stormwater best management practices or BMPs such as detention ponds, infiltration ponds, bioretention rain gardens, et cetera, to remove those total suspended solids and phosphorus, while also infiltrating stormwater runoff from the impervious area components of that site. The last couple of things, we have to require the submittal of as-built documentation to the town so that these things can be adequately tracked, and have procedures in place to assure long-term operation and maintenance is being done. So real quick, those are the three regulatory mechanisms that the town is looking at tonight. As far as where they apply, the illicit discharge detection elimination applies everywhere. The other things, these construction and post-construction projects, only apply on projects that disturb an acre or more. So it's only if people are clear cutting and moving dirt around that disturbs an acre or more that these things kick in. So in all likelihood, the private homeowner that's looking to install a deck or a pool or a shed, in all likelihood, are not going to be triggering these regulations. It really should be larger commercial developments, any industrial developments, probably subdivisions would trigger these things. But for the most part, private homeowners doing some of these smaller projects should not be triggering these things. Why does this need to be done? If not adopted, the town is in non-compliance. Their EPA does fine communities for not meeting certain MS4 regulations. Actually, in a couple of the more recent meetings I've had with EPA, Newton Tedder, who wrote the permit, he has indicated that EPA is expecting these regulations were originally supposed to be in place last year, and they gave communities an extra year to get these in place. So there's been indications from EPA that they are really expecting these regulations to be in place like now. So I would strongly say, I'm glad we're having this meeting, because I have plenty of my communities that I'm working with that this is just, it keeps getting punted down the road. So certainly I appreciate the board's effort to move this through. Certainly Jim, you as well, you and Scott, thank you. And lastly, just a comparison with the existing regulations. So right now the town has kind of pieces of these regulations in place through site plan review, subdivision, wetlands, et cetera, but we don't have everything in place, which is why the town has opted to do this comprehensive ordinance bylaw that pulls everything together into these regulations that will put everything in one place. So the previous bylaw, I believe, was adopted at the June 2021 town meeting. So we have the bylaw in place, and now we're looking at doing these regulations. And what's a little bit different about the way Falmouth has chosen to implement these is basically everything is going to run through DPW. So DPW is again going to be footing a lot of the workload associated with it. So they're going to be doing the reviews and the authorization and which is very nice, because basically you're freeing up some of your other boards like planning and conservation that the DPW is really picking up some of the extra workload. So that's what I had. So does anyone have questions, comments for me? I see a couple. Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, Doug, you're on mute, by the way.
All right, go ahead.
What's the enforcement for these regulations? Is that going to be in the hands of DPW? I know we do have an enforcement officer.
Well, let me see. Jim, do you remember how we set that up? I don't remember. Actually, it was a building inspector. Does it go through building?
Oh, at the outset, after the review of the application, we notify the building inspector that the application is in compliance with the regulations. But for non-compliance in terms of, say, someone refuses or doesn't follow along with what the permit requires or what was in the original application, the initial enforcement would be with Public Works, but ultimately it goes to the select board in terms of fines or anything like that.
Yeah, and there's, I believe you're limited to a $300 maximum fine, and I believe that's Mass state law.
And one other question, I know we've had some drainage pipes that basically aren't discharging into, drainage basins to be infiltrated into. Where do we stand as a town on remedying those situations?
You're saying you have existing basins and outfalls that go just directly to water bodies, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, or out through, gullies that lead to them. And so I'm just curious to know where we stand in terms of correcting that.
Those are still allowed. Those are still allowed. One of the things that we'll be doing, not directly tied to this, but one of the tasks that we're going to be working on this coming year is we need to look at all of your municipal facilities that have large areas of impervious cover and look for ways that we can retrofit those properties specifically. So we will be doing some of that work.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Scott-Price, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Nick, for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Question is about sharing the load of managing the program. You briefly mentioned that having DPW manage it would take the load off of planning, and I forget which other, who else you said, but we know that currently DPW is stretched pretty thin as it is. So what are the options for potentially sharing that management load across planning and DPW? Could there be some sort of sharing or structure that could work out? Or does it have to be solely DPW managing it?
Well, there's no right or wrong answer, I suppose. I mean, I think the way it has been set up so far is that we thought that, well, everything can get funneled into one point person. And I'm assuming that Jim will be coordinating with planning and conservation, because I mean, ultimately they're going to be the ones getting, for instance, the subdivision applications and site plan review applications and stuff like that. So basically, I believe Jim and Scott, go ahead, Jim.
I just want to mention in the regulations, there's also a provision for 53G reviews for projects that are very complicated and go beyond the scope that we would anticipate in terms of our personnel being involved. But for the most part, we're doing a lot of the review already for both planning and ZBA and conservation from time to time. That involves very similar items, and also our street opening and driveway permitting. Also, we're implementing a lot of these same erosion control type requirements onto all of those permits that we issue already. So we're already doing a lot of the review. This would just formalize it.
Okay, thank you. I just know that we've talked about our staffing, and I wanted just to be conscious of putting more work on DPW. So thank you.
Jim has said that he'll do it for, if you give him a raise, that would also help enforcement, I believe, as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So question for Nick. Is it common for the Board of Selectmen to be the enforcement authority after the initial administrative enforcement by a department? Or is that more commonly done by conservation or planning?
I would say it's about, I'd say it's about 20% done by conservation, 50% by planning, and 30% by Board of Selectmen. So it's really across the board. And EPA has really, they've kind of told communities that this is what you need to do. You need to remove your nitrogen, you need to remove your phosphorus, but they've really left it up to communities to, as far as how they want to set it up internally. And I have seen it, everything from what I just said, you know, everything goes through conservation. In Yarmouth, that's how it's being set up. In Dennis, I believe it's being set up similar to what you guys have opted to. Basically, it's going to go through engineering. A lot of my other communities are routing everything through planning board because they're the ones that are getting a lot of these applications. So there's really no right or wrong answer as long as it's being done.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat from one of the members of our Water Quality Management Committee, Tom Duncan. And he says, in reference to nitrogen and phosphorus removal on pages 19 and 20, best management practices, regarding best management practices, what criteria, e.g. economic, physical, chemical, determine what is considered maximum extent practicable?
Yep, I saw that and I was actually trying to respond. So that particular line in the regulations is copied exactly from the permit itself. And it just simply says that optimize stormwater BMPs for nitrogen and phosphorus removal to the maximum extent practicable. And really what EPA has done is they have really left it up to the judgment of the reviewing entity as far as, have you gone far enough to be treating these particular pollutants? And it's kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of weird because you're already having to remove phosphorus. You're already having to do 60% phosphorus for new development and 50% phosphorus for redevelopment. So you already have that hard target that you need to hit for phosphorus. And nitrogen is, you're going to be, all of these BMPs you're going to be constructing to treat phosphorus are also having nitrogen removal as well. There's a component of nitrogen that's going to be pulled out as well, depending on what type of BMP. So in my opinion, EPA has left that requirement somewhat vague on purpose. And, you know, I think as long as you're basically showing that, you know, we are being reasonable as far as what is being designed and what's being proposed, that I don't anticipate the applicant will have an issue with it.
Okay, I have a question of my own if nobody else is waiting. So on page 14 under 3.0 exemptions, number 4, normal maintenance and improvements on the town of Falmouth publicly owned roadways and associated drainage infrastructure would be exempt. My question is, would that include a repaving project or just like pothole repair?
Repaving is not, assuming you're not, if you're just overlaying, you're not, that's not land disturbance. And honestly, in my opinion as well, if you're reclaiming, you are technically not changing the infiltrative capacity of that area. So I would say that no, that does not trigger this bylaw.
Now, is that another judgment call? Because what if we're repaving a road that's diving down and dumping into a pond and it doesn't have any significant drainage and we're just repaving it? Do we just get out of it or should we be addressing it?
Yep, good question. So really, I think what you would not have to do is you would not have to hit those nitrogen and phosphorus removals. But say if you are within buffer area, you're still going to have to go through Conservation Commission. You're still going to have to do erosion and sediment controls within those regulated resource areas and their buffer zones. You will not. The intent is that you're not going to have, you know, so if you go pave a road, you're not going to have to go build 15 different detention ponds on land that you don't own.
But is it like best management practice to install drainage on a repaving project? If I'm just asking for, it seems to me that's something that this should be addressing, and I'm wondering how it gets caught and how it gets implemented. Jim, are you ready to speak to that?
Well, the other thing too is that under the permit itself, redevelopment activities that exclusively limited to maintenance and improvement of existing roadways, including widening less than a single lane, adding shoulders, et cetera, shall improve existing conditions unless infeasible and are exempt from the regulations, basically. So under the permit, you're not required to do anything. You basically just have to do what's reasonable.
Okay.
And again, it's a judgment call. What's reasonable.
Okay. I have another one if nobody else is waiting. One is about the fee structure. We can talk about that amongst ourselves, but I have another one, a question about on the top of the section on fee structure on page 16. It says that the Department of Public Works may, at the applicant's expense, retain a registered PE or other professional consultant to advise the Department of Public Works reviewing agent on any of all aspects of these plans. I have a concern with that because we've been lately having a lot of feedback from developers and engineers saying that this additional layer of professional peer review is expensive and cumbersome. And I'm hoping that that's not something that is some state law that we have to apply, or is that a discretionary thing for the town?
Yeah, that's nothing that's required under the permit. And Jim, you might be able to speak to this better than me, but I mean, I think the way it is now is we basically left it in there in case, I don't know, so if you have a huge project or something like that coming in, if you want to have an outside consultant review.
Right.
Jim?
So I think the in most cases, the review would be internal. There's only unusual instances where it's a complicated project that we'd be looking at some type of a peer review, which would go through a process of getting an estimate and then having the applicant agree to that. Which, and I know that it seems to be a subject that's discussed a fair amount here in town, but I can tell you from my experience working in probably 40 or 50 different communities in Massachusetts from the private sector, it's not at all unusual. In fact, it's the norm that that's what's expected even for smaller projects. And in our case, I wouldn't see us doing that for smaller projects, only for the ones that are complicated and require a fair amount of effort in terms of review.
A lot of towns just don't have the staff and the capacity to do it. But Falmouth has been doing this for a long time. And
Mr. Chairman, I would not necessarily agree with that. For example, in the town of Framingham, I think they have 9 or 10 registered professional engineers on staff, and they routinely use peer review for just about every subdivision project that they review. And that's a big. It's no longer a town now; it's a city.
Right.
So it might be a little bit unusual in the town of Falmouth, but certainly off Cape and even in some communities on the Cape, it's not an unusual occurrence.
Okay, it just seems like a kind of a reduction in service from what we've been doing if we're kind of transitioning to that. I'm hoping it's only going to be occasionally when it's a really big project, like you said. Can we set some kind of
our expectation?
Will we set some kind of a guideline as to how big the project would be, or I mean, I'm just curious how often that's going to get triggered and how we'll determine that. I guess that's probably not really something you're prepared to speak to at the moment, and we're not going to vote this tonight, so we'll have a chance to think a little more about that.
I think it's a good, I agree with you, Doug. I think it's a good question. And I think coming up with some guidelines up front so any developer will know what to expect is important. I know we came up, we got required to do a peer review for that Little Pond affordable housing project that's just been completed recently. Well, that had to be paid for out of the affordable housing fund. So what precipitates that? And should we be deferring those kinds of funds for a consultant? Under what guidelines should that be exercised?
Right. We'll have to think about that a little bit for the next discussion.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any of my other communities that have had guidelines in there about the size and scope of a project. The only thing some of my other communities do is they will have, say, like, you got to pay in $2,500. And then if that's not enough, then you might be on the hook for, another $2,500, but it at least gives you a dollar amount to start with, people know they're not going to be in it for 10,000 or something right off the bat. So that's something to think about adding in.
That's a good point. Maybe that could be an addendum to the fee structure at the bottom. Okay. Are there any other questions from the board or the public? All right. Well, thank you guys for putting this together. I appreciate it. It's another important step to keeping our rivers clean. Is there anything else you want to add tonight?
That's it. I'd just like to thank the board for your time.
Not on our
Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, so next we have.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, if I may.
Yes, sir.
You're going to, you and members of the board will keep this hearing open and close it at your next meeting when you consider adopting regulations.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Suso, through you, Mr. Chair, do we need to have a motion to continue it, or we're just leaving it open?
I think it'd be helpful to have a motion to continue it.
Yeah. Okay. So
I
would. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I would move that we continue it until our next scheduled meeting.
Second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor, Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
And Brown, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear a discussion update on COVID-19 issues from Mr. McGann.
Is everybody hearing me okay?
Yes.
So I'm going to share screen like we did back when we were doing Zoom before, if that's okay.
Very good.
Here we go. You guys seeing that okay? So
Yes.
as of today, our case count is 1,640. There's been since August 1st, 21 confirmed and 9 probable. The probables are your rapid antigen that people want to get the rapid test. You can see in the chart that we do every week, you can see an increase over the last 3 weeks in cases. We were pretty flat to 0 at the end of June. Anything after July 1st, I would assume, is Delta. You can just sort of see the increase in cases as Delta started to show up. In the upper chart, you can see low, moderate, substantial, and high. This is the CDC's indicators on community level transmission. So in anything from 0 to 10 would be low that's cases in the past 7 days per 100,000. Moderate would be 10 to 50, substantial up to 99, and anything over 100 is high. We're at 7.1. Our percent positivity, which is basically the total number of confirmed cases versus the amount of tests. Anything greater than less than 5 would be considered low. We're at 2.47. I also put the county number. This most recent county number is 4.31. They're between 5 and 8%. Anything between 8 and 10% would be considered substantial, and anything greater than 10% is high. The county, as you've been mentioning it previously, was in the high category. Today, I believe it fell to substantial, though the testing shows that it's a bit less than that, but they have been moved to substantial, I think, as of this afternoon. I first saw it on Channel 5 News, actually, and then just did some research on it. We were definitely in the high category than the Outer Cape. So we've been sort of hanging less than 10 with our incidence rate. And but for the county, when you had so many cases coming out of the Upper Cape, definitely pushed that. But we are definitely seeing more cases over the last 3 to 4 weeks. We've been averaging about 2.5 cases per day. In the county data, this is the county chart. You can see the same sort of increase over the 3 weeks. They're starting to see hopefully a little bit of a drop. We'll see. And so that's the county numbers. You can see we got flat and then also did an increase. Very importantly is hospitalizations. At the top is the most recent report of hospitalizations. There was one in the hospital here in Falmouth, one in the ICU. The cases from June were 3 and 0 from early June up to 5 on the 21st between the two hospitals. We're at 5 now between the two hospitals. So you haven't seen a surge in cases, much like you've been hearing on the news. The vaccines work against serious disease, such as hospitalizations and deaths. And that's sort of been bearing out here in Falmouth. So case-wise, we are seeing an increase in cases. The cases are not inherently, resulting in a lot of hospitalizations, which is great. What I can also see going back to the first chart in the data is definitely seeing a lot of multiples in households. So one household, you can see as many as 4 or 5. We know that Delta has more viral particle, higher viral load. So in that data, we do see, I think there's like three particular households that have more than 3 cases. But still, we are definitely seeing cases, and especially once they go into a household, definitely getting a lot higher. Good news vaccination-wise, in this section here, if you can see my cursor, you see that at the bottom of total number of people that got first doses, in 1 week, we saw 175 people get first doses, 84 people get their second dose. That's been higher than before. The last couple of weeks, I think with Delta, you see an increase in vaccine uptake. And you can see the percent increase from week to week. You can see that's been in that category that's under the age of 50 primarily, even below the age of 30. And that's where we're seeing the majority of the cases. So that's a good thing that we're seeing that uptake in that category. The 20 to 29 has been the highest, the hardest to sort of uptake. And we saw, roughly a 2% increase. So 85% of all our eligible residents have received at least 1 dose. 77% of our eligible residents are fully vaccinated. And that is primarily, in my opinion, the reason why we're not doing, let's go back to this chart. So you see this huge spike in April. That was when we had the B117 and the Mid-Cape outbreak. You can see we went from, 33 cases to, almost 100 cases in a matter of a week. With knowing what we know about Delta, if we didn't have a high vaccination rate, we would see spikes and increases like that. So I think we can say, between looking at what we see in Falmouth, that it's bearing out that the vaccines definitely work, and the vaccines work really well for the hospitalizations and the deaths. So I'm going to stop sharing for now, and I think you guys might have a lot of questions, so I'd rather just open it up to questions.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, Scott, I just became aware of a family that suddenly, virtually, they all got infected. But my question is, what's the most likely way that they contacted somebody that was infected when that are you seeing a pattern for transmission?
Not a pattern per se. It's probably indoor close contact. Would be the way I would say would be the primary. It's not easy to figure out, and people don't necessarily remember. Think about if I had called you and said, where you been the last 4 days, you may not necessarily know every place you've been, but if you knew somebody that was infected, that would be the reasonable assumption. We'd know where that came from. So, so if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I was trying to come up with some guidance to help people avoid certain situations.
Well, we have a mask advisory right now, right? So indoor tight space, the tighter, the closer contact, the more people crammed into one space, the higher the risk. But that's been like that since day one. It's just with Delta, it's got a higher viral load. So you'll see it spread more, hence what you saw in Provincetown.
So Scott, I had spoken to Mr. Suso while we were setting the agenda, and I was kind of on the fence of whether or not we should have another agenda item on the mask mandate. And he said that the sense from you was that probably not really needed at this time. Do you still feel that way?
Well, I'm your health agent, right? So I'm not going to tell you anything that's, I'm not going to tell you not to be safer. Okay, if that makes sense. You'll have to balance whether you think that's something you want to do. Let me take over, and I'll show you let me show you one thing, if you might let me do it one more time to answer your question. So this slide here, give me 1 second, please. So the CDC is telling, because unfortunately right now, the state's not giving me a lot, not giving health agents a lot. We're not getting a lot from the state right now. So, looking at the weekly morbidity and mortality weekly report from the CDC, they have a document that I, got off of there that says the guidance for implementing COVID prevention strategies in the context of varying community transmission levels and vaccination coverage, where I got that chart from, the low, medium risk. it tells you to look at your vaccination rate. We know we've been kicking it with vaccines, right? We know our hospitalizations aren't up and our indicators are low. So in the absence of guidance coming from the state, that's where we're at. But for me to tell you that it's not safer to have a mask mandate, I would be lying to you to tell you that it's not that a level of safety that's more safe than not. It's not something that a lot of towns have gone to yet. I think Salem did that today. The Outer Cape had done it. I think if we had with the Provincetown scenario, absolutely would have been. I would have done it without you, honestly. Okay, I would have done it without you and got a retroactive vote from the board if we saw that. Now, you can say, then what are we doing? Are we waiting for it to happen? Well, at that point, then what I should be getting from the people that are, I'm a health agent that does a lot of different things. I'm not necessarily just COVID, right? So the epidemiologists that do this for a living, just this, should be telling me from the state to do it. That's kind of where I would want to be where I'm at. So we're not, I don't have any, I'm not ticking those boxes on the CDC, the CDC guidance are for implementing more restrictions. So that's where we're at. But to say that it's not safer to mask up or, whatever other mitigation strategies you want to do you're free to do it as you want.
Certainly. I certainly understand. I'm not trying to put all the responsibility on you. I'm just saying that your sense is that we're not in that deep right now to put this mandate on people and make them uncomfortable and have to deal with it. I noticed when I went to the grocery store, I actually went to 2 different grocery stores this week, and a lot of people are wearing masks, and it's great that people are taking that extra precaution, and I encourage that. But some people are very uncomfortable with it, and also very uncomfortable with governmental mandates if they're not really necessary. Ms. English-Braga?
I was just going to say that I hope folks, we have this mask advisory, and I really do hope folks take into account that, the individuals who are working at, those frontline folks that are at grocery stores and at the stores that we are at these little tiny ice cream shops where, folks are spending their money in the summer, and the town is really full of a lot of individuals. Some of those, some of those folks are obviously exposed to just hundreds of people a day who are coming into those establishments. So, I just think whatever, we can do as a community, to just keep the folks that live here in this community as safe as possible. I hear what Scott is saying, and he's watching that, and he's being vigilant about sort of the criteria. But I do think it's okay for this board to emphasize that, if wearing that mask doesn't make you feel uncomfortable because you have a medical condition or whatever else it might be, there's no harm in wearing the mask, and there's potentially good that comes out of it. And, we focused so much last year on trying to do the things so that kids could be in school in as healthy and normative of a way as possible. And we're kind of coming up on that beginning of the school year again. And I know Desi is, trying to figure out what the regulations will be, but the reality is if you have a community outbreak like they had at the other end of the Cape, that is significant. And so, I hope that we just continue to be vigilant so that our school year can start on time and as regular as possible, because that's, hugely meaningful for a lot of families who need to be back to work.
Scott, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, so a couple of things. The superintendent, Dr. Parkinson, who is our medical consultant, we meet weekly. All right, so we are talking. Also, we did do a COVID clinic at the high school today. First dose today, second dose will be the 31st. So, we're trying as hard as we can to get everybody that can be vaccinated. And as far as the DESI, again, we weren't afraid to make decisions prior to any guidance from the state back in April. I closed all personal care, hair salons and so forth before the state did. And we closed schools before the state did. And we issued a mask mandate before the state did. So it's not that we're afraid to do it. So it's just, I only have what I have to go on. And so, that's kind of where, I'm not saying not to do it. I'm not saying to do it. I'm just saying this is what I have to provide you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Absolutely. I certainly understand and I appreciate that. Yes, Mr. Patterson.
Just one more question. I think since we know it spreads in families fairly quickly, Scott, could you give the listening audience at least some of the symptoms that they should be looking for, just so that they're on top of it as soon as the somebody in the family becomes infected?
Well, if you lose your taste and smell, that's the only weird thing that'll automatically tell you you need to go get tested. The rest of it obviously meets other things. So stuffy nose, cough, fever, chills, a lot of the other symptoms that you get, from strep to the common cold. My family took the masks off, and within 2 weeks we got a cold once around graduation time. So I think a lot of that stuff goes around. So it's very similar to that. And so I think people get caught off guard, and with the vaccine, and you're a healthy person, and it may very well be quite weak at the beginning, and so it does get misdiagnosed. So I've definitely seen an increase in tests in the hundreds per week. I know I talked to Convenient MD last week. They do the majority of testing comes out of there. They've been awesome at. Thank goodness they came in about 2 years ago. They do the rapid tests and the PCR tests, and they're behind trying to get as many people done. So people can get tested. So you should get tested. You'd want to quarantine. You don't want to isolate yourself from other family members prior to any of those symptoms, because it's going to be too late by the time you go get tested. And even if it's the rapid test, but you've been coughing and sneezing, on the couch with the kids running around for 2 days. So, it's that's been the hard part. That's a hard thing when inside of a family, especially if you have a small home. You can't, not all of us have wings of the house where we could place different family members, right? If we have a three bedroom, 1 bath, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah. Megan?
I just wanted to ask one question to follow up on what Scott was saying about testing, because, we've kind of been hearing that some of that rapid testing has been harder for people to get. What's your thought on that, or any suggestions you have?
It is, and I'm, trying to think about, the best way to maybe help that. And speaking with the county tomorrow to see if there's anything we can do, maybe on our level. Yes, Convenient MD did say they were having difficulty, but what's strange is at the peak of the pandemic, not peak, but I would say, let's say, we started getting enough tests in maybe this late spring of last year. We were doing is upwards of 3,000 tests per week in the town. And so we're doing about 1,500, not a week, every other week. So about 1,500 a week. And now we're about 800 a week, 700 a week. And I'm surprised that we don't have the capacity. I think the problem is rapid versus PCR. PCR is a swab test goes to a lab. It's a lot easier for Convenient MD and these other places. Rapid tests, they have to read it themselves and then do the paperwork themselves. They have to issue it into Maven. I've used that word Maven before. That's the epidemiological website. So someone has to put that in Maven, or it's not a case, right? So when they do the rapid test, that paperwork has to be done by the establishment, by the facility, not by the lab, which has got much bigger computers and computing power to just send it all at once. So I think that's the problem. I think that's the problem is rapid tests take more labor. Is the best way I can say it.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Scott Price.
I'm not sure if this is a question or just for us to discuss, but my understanding is that we moved this meeting to virtual because of the Delta variant and concerns. And it feels like we're sending mixed signals to the community by saying that we don't think there should be a mask mandate and that just a mask advisory is fine. And yet we're here on Zoom today instead of in person. So I don't know, just an observation that I feel like was worth mentioning.
No, I agree with that. And it was my call to do this remote, and I wasn't exactly sure where we were at with the Delta and the chart. So maybe it was a little overabundance of caution, but that's where we're at this week.
I don't think I was going to say I appreciate it. I mean, one of the things that is different is that the room that we have to be in when we meet and that the public comes in is a very small room for, a number of folks to be at. And so, our meetings go for a really long time, and sometimes people have to wait a really long time for their item and they're sitting there. So I think that there are, even if we don't have a mask mandate, I still think that there are things that we can do in ways that are healthier and maybe smarter choices. And so I actually, I think this was really helpful, Doug. But I agree with Angela. I think we're in this strange limbo right now where we're not quite sure, and Scott's monitoring it. We're not quite sure if we're going to have to shift or pivot. And it's a little bit unclear, but I think everybody is is on edge or seeing things a little differently than it was a few weeks ago.
And Ms. Boonstra would like to comment again, the lady that spoke earlier at public comment. If we could promote her back up to speak, I'd appreciate it. And I will say that I pay close attention to my emails, and we don't have a lot of emails from people saying that they're concerned and they want the mask mandate. Maybe in a couple. Have I missed any? Has anybody else seen significant? Yes, Mr. McGann?
Actually, I do get them, but not at near the level I got in the spring of 2020.
And we've received a few,
Okay.
I believe.
Welcome back.
Thank you again. Thank you for recognizing me. I'll try to be brief. I very much appreciate the thoughtfulness of your discussion here. And I appreciate from Mr. McGann the fact that hospitalizations are down and vaccines are up. I would just like to bring up a couple of additional points. One is that even though our vaccination rate is great here in Falmouth, it's summer. And we have a lot of visitors coming in from other places, and we don't know what their vaccination rate is. And as you all know, I don't have to tell you this, even the vaccinated can transmit the disease, the virus. And so I am particularly concerned about transmitting the virus unintentionally from vaccinated people to households where there are individuals under the age of 12 that cannot be vaccinated. You just had a discussion about hoping to bring schools back. And so I'm concerned about that. And then also I'm concerned about protecting the frontline workers. You know, we all, I think Ms. English Braga mentioned, you know, how grateful we are for their work, but it seems as though maybe their employers are not necessarily out there to protect them, as my conversation today at the market, at the Windfall Market. And finally, you know, I look to my government to keep me safe in a lot of ways. And I appreciate that my government, you know, does things to do that. And so while I know being vaccinated that I probably won't end up in the hospital or dying, but I also don't really want to get sick. And I also don't really want to pass it on unknowingly to a person under age 12 who can't get vaccinated. And so I look to my government to protect all of us from all of that. It's not just that you're protecting me from hospitalization and death, but also from getting sick and potentially very ill. Thank you very much. I've gone on too long.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. So I don't know, we didn't put it on for a vote, but I'd like a sense of the board. Mr. McGann made a comment earlier that he's the one watching the numbers. And if he felt like there was something that was going to come up, he would put a mask mandate in place. And I'd like to just get a sense of the board that we're good with that and kind of just tell him that, go ahead and do that, and we'll back him up later if we have to.
I think that's very appropriate. He's most up to date on the status of the virus, and particularly the Delta virus, and he can respond more quickly. We don't only get together every couple of weeks. So things have been changing rapidly across the country, certainly. So I'm more than happy to kind of grant him that authority.
Mr. Suso, is that something that we can vote even though we didn't?
Yeah, I think he has it.
If I may.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I could do anything that would involve public health with a retroactive vote of the Board of Health. And which we did when we instituted, for example, when we instituted the closure of personal care. And then I had at the next board meeting. You know, the thing is that we don't, you know, with the exception of the CDC, you know, and knock on wood, we have never been close to the substantial or high level at any, you know, maybe that 1 or 2 weeks. If you know, the other thing too is without guidance from the state, I'm kind of just using the CDC and basing it only on that, right? So, you know, is that the best way? I hope so. because right now I don't have, we had state calls and guidance changes the entire year, and now we have crickets. So you're leaving it, sort of right up to me. I'll do it based on, but I'm going to do it based on the slides I showed you previously. I'm not going to do it because of the number of calls. I would do it solely on hitting a metric of, let's say, moderate, unless my board asks me to do something else. So my board could have me, they could put this on the agenda and do it without me, I guess is the other way. I want to make sure everybody was clear of that. So if the board said that we wanted this as an agenda item, we could, would be as an agenda item with the board.
Right. The Board of Health could do the mask mandate without us. We just did it so it'd be a more publicly.
Absolutely. So, and I, as their agent, could do it at a retroactive vote or bring it up as an agenda item, not do anything until the board heard it. But again, I would advise the board with nothing to go on would be this, because if we're low, we're low. If we're moderate, we're moderate, and if we're high, we're high, right? So I guess that's what I would go. That's what I would be inclined to do.
Very good. It sounds like you have the authority to do what you need to do. So,
and just to underscore, Mr. Chairman, if I will, we've been working closely with Scott for at least 18 months, and Scott's credit, his actions are facts and data driven, and not driven by what happened to be in the media or elsewhere that may not be factual. So we rely heavily on Scott, and he is well connected. So that's certainly going to continue.
Very good. Yes, Megan.
Just the last thing, I hope that we can just sort of carry that message and concern that Scott has articulated that I think other people share, that we really aren't hearing a lot from the state. And it is concerning because the CDC is sort of writ large and they're looking at, across the entire country. And I think it was very helpful for us to have some of those phone calls. Maybe it doesn't need to be as consistent, but it really has kind of been like a complete evaporation of some of that sort of strategy and data. At least that's what it sounds like. And I think that that's concerning.
I would suspect, personally, I suspect that is probably because the numbers are way down across most of the state, and the Cape did so well for so long, and we're in the red now. But as Ms. McGann said, we're still doing pretty well comparatively to what it was previously. Yes?
And so, on the call, I on the same call last Tuesday, we talked about contact tracing. The lead epidemiologist says we're not going to contact trace this forever, right? We don't do that with a lot of, we do that with tuberculosis. We don't do contact tracing with the flu, right? So, and then the other point, someone else from the state's like, well, we're going to continue the CTC. If you remember the CTC being the entity that does contact tracing if a town can't handle it. They're going to extend the CTC till December so towns can booster up their staffing levels for contact tracing. At the same time, someone else on the call is saying that we're not going to contact trace this for all that much longer. So I think the state's still trying to figure out what they want to do. And I think it's got to do with, sort of, the future, like living with COVID or having this gone for a long, long time and getting vaccinated and sort of doing it and going about one's life with the COVID risk, as opposed to doing what we did last spring and shut down some masks, because the shutdown of the mask will lower the cases, but it's not going to eliminate the disease. So I think the state's probably working on what direction they want to go in, which leaves us hanging to make our own decisions. So you have towns like Salem that does it. So if Falmouth has a mask mandate and people's like, well, I'm just going to go out to eat Mashpee because Mashpee doesn't, but if you go to Sandwich does, it's not the way I'd like to do it, honestly.
Yeah.
Really not. But.
And that is part of the reason I don't want to force a mask mandate if it's not really necessary, because it's great that people will voluntarily do it, but I don't want to turn people away from Falmouth just because they might be people who don't want to wear masks. And like you said, they'll go to Mashpee or somewhere else instead. I don't want to be too alarmist if we're still really doing okay. Okay, any other questions for Mr. McGann? Well, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, so next we have interview, vote, and appoint committee members. And the first is Affirmative Action Committee. And we have two applicants for, I believe, 2 positions. Is that correct, Mr. Suso?
Yes, you have 2 openings there. my understanding.
Right, that's what we see. And so, welcome, Ms. Alves Hunter.
Good evening.
Good evening. You're first on our list. If you'd like to tell us why you'd like to be on the Affirmative Action Committee, we have read your resume and appreciate it.
I would like to be on the Affirmative Action Committee. As someone who grew up in Falmouth, graduated from Falmouth High School, I would like to help to change the lens of the systematic racism that is in Falmouth. As someone that was born right before MLK and JFK were killed and were marches for the Civil Rights Act, you know, here we still are. And as I was sitting here listening to what Mr. Susu said about Mr. McGann, about being facts and data driven, there are facts and data that are driven that support what I've said. And we need to change that. Because unless you're white, straight, and non-disabled, you are an other. As a mother of a Black male child who at the age of 7 tried to commit suicide because he was racially bullied, but as a Black woman who is light-skinned, who has also benefited from light privilege, I think I can bring a well-rounded opinion and thought process to the table.
Well, that's helpful. Thank you. Any questions from the board for this applicant? Yes, Ms. Taylor.
I have a couple. Hi, Terry. I see that you work in Worcester presently.
No, I don't. And I was working remotely. That's just where the advocacy.
Oh, okay. I thought it said December 2020 to present as an outreach coordinator in Worcester. Okay. That was going to be my question about making the meetings. My second question is around helping the Affirmative Action Committee function effectively and cohesively. They've been challenged around some of those issues this past year, and I'm wondering what you would bring to the committee to help them really function effectively and making sure that everyone is heard and that everyone is really feeling safe to speak.
Okay. As a director of operations for a global company, which was the Authenticity Institute, I have found that when it comes to people, and it's something that you don't understand, you have to give them empathy and validation for you to hear and also listen. I went to a diversity clinic in which we had a Black speaker and a white speaker. And what they did is they took the Black people in one room and white people in another, for them to feel safe to say something without offending someone. Then they brought everyone back together and everybody had a conversation, and it was a safe place. I think we all have implicit biases. It's just that we cannot take them personally. It's not you're either a good person or you're racist. We all have implicit bias. It's the fact that you've got to listen and validate in order to understand before you respond, responding instead of reacting.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from board
I
members?
would, sorry, if there aren't any other questions, I would move approval to Ms. Alves Hunter for a position on the Affirmative Action Committee. It looks like we have 2 separate terms. So maybe I'll just start with the first one for the term that ends 6/30/2022.
Patterson, second.
Okay. No other comments, so let's take a roll call vote. Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Price, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
And Brown, aye. So welcome and thank you for your service. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Okay. And next we have Dale Cap. Welcome, Ms. Cap. Would you like to tell us a little bit why you'd like to be? I know you sent it in your resume, but you could tell us here so people at home can hear it too. Oh, your mute is on.
You're on mute.
There you go. Yes.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to come before you to apply for this membership on the Affirmative Action Committee. I don't suppose that people at home know that I have been attending the meetings for 4 years because I have a definite interest in ensuring and seeing that the town move forward with what it's already, working on. And I see that, we need to certainly increase Falmouth as a welcoming community. And in so doing, we may find that we can indeed keep diverse candidates. It's when a diverse candidate comes to the town and looks around that they can assess for themselves what the tone of inclusion or exclusion is. And so we've had trouble with that. And I think that speaks to our needing to ensure that we improve with our diversity, so that we get our residents to respect diversity and to understand the whole meaning of equity. Because while people are so good-hearted, I think that sometimes it escapes people just what it is that they need to do and recognize in terms of being able to accept diversity. I don't know if you need anything in the way of my background or experiences with diversity, or would you like to hear any more?
No, I think, I thought your resume was very well done and I appreciate it. I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to give you a chance to share a little bit about, what your reasons were for wanting to be on the board, on the committee. Yes, go ahead. And then we'll have a question from Ms. Taylor.
I have been asked to ensure that everybody knows that I am biracial. And I will have to say that, I grew up as a biracial person and my parents never denigrated or pushed forward either one of those particular heritages. And I will say that I understand that in some realms I've had privilege, but what people need to understand is also that there's a uniqueness in not being accepted by either.
Right.
And you're too white. So I think diversity is a very important thing to me.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Taylor?
I was just thinking of the same questions that I asked the first candidate, just around helping to assist that committee to really be more efficient in their deliberations, and really how you would create a safe space for people to speak and to be heard. And I know that you have been to our meetings, so I think you have experienced some of the challenges that that committee has faced.
I have. Thank you for your question. Having come from corporate and dealt with corporate and governments, I know that as we all do, one of the most important things is just to respect each other, and everybody has something to offer. And so just attentive listening is a very important factor that allows people to feel like they've been heard. And in terms of how to maybe move the committee forward cohesively, I would probably suggest that the committee identifies some focus, because I don't really feel that there was a focus, like maybe choose some items for the year annually, vote on what focus the committee is going to have for the year, and then speak to and work on those particular focused items.
Thank you.
Sounds like a very good answer to me.
I would move approval of Ms. Kaplan for a position on the Affirmative Action Committee for a term ending 6/30/2024.
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
And Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
And Brown, aye. So thank you very much for your service.
you.
We appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dale.
Thanks. Okay, next we have Cape Light Compact, Matt Patrick. And I see Matt's here. But we probably would have put him on even if he wasn't.
Since we've read.
Welcome, Matt.
Hi, folks.
Matt.
Do you want to tell us anything about Cape Light Compact, or if we just appoint you?
No, I mean, I just think it's, when I tried to think about what I could do with my time now. I thought it could be best used as a representative to the Cape Light Compact representing the town, given all the experience I have with it and with energy issues, climate change, and so on. So thank you for the opportunity, and I hope to represent the town well.
I move to appoint Matt Patrick to a position with the Cape Light Compact with a term until 6/30/2024.
Patterson, second.
All right, all in favor, Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
And Brown, aye. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate your
Thank you,
service.
Matt.
Thank you
I
very
can't
much.
think of anybody more qualified. Thank you.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work.
Okay, thanks. And now we have applicant for the Cultural Council, Alice Kosiemba. Did I say that right?
Well, close.
Okay.
Alice Kochimba, I always say, pretend you're sneezing. Kochimba.
Okay. Very good. And so can you tell us why you would like to be on the Cultural Council? And what you might bring?
I'd like to give back to the Falmouth Cultural Council. When I started Calliope, Calliope was the beneficiary of 2 small grants. One which helped the series launch by getting stipends to pay the poets who read, and the second to establish a workshop for local poets who wanted to learn how to write the craft of poetry. And that second grant helped the series take off, and it became one of the most sought after series in Massachusetts. So I've been the recipient of some grants, and I'd like to be part of really revitalizing a very vibrant arts community that's undergone some hardship based on the pandemic.
Okay, well, thank you. Any questions from the board?
No, just a thank you.
Thank you. And I always say the arts is good for business. The more that you can bring the arts alive, the more people shop and eat out. So I think it's part of the whole community. So thank you.
That's probably true. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, I entertain a motion to appoint Ms. Kochimba.
I motion to appoint Ms. Kochimba to a position with a term ending July 30th, 2024. Can we get you in for the long haul?
Absolutely.
Patterson, second.
All those in favor, Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
And Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
And Brown, aye. So thank you very much. Okay, next we have EDIC, Kevin M. Holmes. Mr. Holmes, are you ready to tell us why you'd like to be on the EDIC?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the time. As someone who moved to Falmouth in 1985 and had the pleasure of growing up here and going to Falmouth Academy, graduating from there, and starting my banking career in Falmouth, there was a period of time where my work took me off Cape, gravitated me up towards the Boston area. And while that was a terrific career opportunity for me, it was always kind of a regret of mine that it disconnected me from the town. And I always just jokingly said to my wife, I feel like I only sleep in Falmouth. I don't really do much other than sleep here because I'm always in a car driving elsewhere. And 18 months ago, I had the opportunity to move over to Cape Cod 5 and start working here in Falmouth on Main Street. And we did an awful lot through the PPP loan program, which gave me an opportunity to meet tons and tons of business owners here in town and re-network with people and support and help folks in the community where I lived. And that was extremely rewarding. And the bank has been had someone in this position for the last 12 years. I've been very anxious to give back because I think Falmouth has very much shaped who I was growing up from a very young age. And I think my skill set fits this particular committee very well based on my background and what I do for a living. So I think it's a terrific fit. It gives me a chance to do something I've wanted to do for a long time, which is to give back to the town in some small way. And that's why I'm hoping that you guys are supportive of me taking on this position.
Well, I see we got a letter of recommendation from the EDIC with regard to your appointment. So I think you're in good hands, and it's certainly an important position. The EDIC does a lot of good work. So we are thoughtful about who we appoint, and I appreciate your nice resume that you sent. I did notice on one of your references, Suzanne Holmes, from president of RP Homes Corporation.
Yes.
Are you related to Phil Holmes?
I am. He's my uncle.
Oh, he's a great guy. I learned a lot from him when I was younger in my career. I'm in construction as well.
Okay, my sister, the master plumber.
Oh, really? Okay.
Figure that out. Have a family with 2 boys. One's an optometrist, one's a banker, and the daughter becomes the master plumber.
Wow.
But she does a terrific job.
Somebody's got to carry on the job.
3rd generation. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, great. So I'm glad to have you aboard. And is there a motion to approve Mr. Holmes for this position?
Motion to approve Mr. Holmes for the position with financial experience with a term until June 30th, 2024.
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Ms. English Braga, are you still with us?
I'm here just having a 5-year-old tantrum. English Braga, aye.
Okay, and Brown, aye. So thank you, Mr. Holmes. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate the time, guys. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Next, we have Falmouth Housing Authority Tenant Board Committee. First name on the list is Kathleen Haynes. Is Ms. Haynes with us this evening?
Mr. Chairman, could I just interject? You have one person for the Water Quality Management Committee position. Perhaps the board would prefer to handle that first before you take the several interviews for the Housing Authority. Just a thought.
Okay, well, I would entertain that idea if Ms. Mora is ready to go. I'm not sure if she would be ready. See, she's coming on.
Hello.
Welcome. Hello.
I'm here. This is great. This is
Hello.
fun.
Water Quality Management Committee, that's a big job. Tell us why you want to do it.
Sure. So I have over 15 years of experience in environmental monitoring and research. The last 7 of those have been running 2 water quality monitoring programs at the Woquoit Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. So I feel like I have, the scientific skill set and the knowledge of the water quality issues in our area that I think I could bring something to the committee. And I'm looking forward to actually get involved in some real management after spending 10 years looking at, declining water quality in the Bay. It's been, it's a little demoralizing. So anything I can do to start helping out solve this water quality problem that we have on Cape, and especially in the town that I live, is an exciting opportunity for me.
Great. I will say, as a member of the Falmouth Water Stewards Board, I've certainly seen your name many times, and I'm aware of all your help that you've given to that organization. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
I would move to appoint Jordan Mora to the position on the Water Quality Management Committee, a term that expires on 6/30/2024.
Patterson, second.
Excellent. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
And Brown, aye. Well, thank you, Ms. Moore. Appreciate it.
Indeed,
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay, now we'll go back to the Housing Authority Tenant Board. And the first name again is Kathleen Haynes. And if Ms. Haynes is with us, let's please promote her to panelist. Yes, Mr. Johnson-Stubb.
Mr. Chair, we are missing 4 of the individuals who are listed here. We have, as you probably see on the screen, Julian Benz is with us, as is Marie Vautour. But the others we have not seen present on the Zoom as of yet.
Okay. Well, let's interview the folks that are here at least. And so Julian Benz is listed first, so I'm just going to go in the order that they're listed.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
That's great.
So tell us why you want to get on to the board, if you would.
Well, I got the notice in the mail. I assume most of or all of us that are in Falmouth Housing Authority housing got the notice. And I looked at it and I thought about it for a little bit and I thought, perfect opportunity for me to represent, you know, the fact that I am a tenant, but also to dust off some of my professional skills that I haven't worked with for a while. So I thought I might be able to add and be value added only because I have a pretty good understanding of complex issues surrounding entities that get funding from federal, state, and even local environments. I was a financial aid administrator for years and years at several different colleges and universities. So it's a skill set that I have. And I also am a very grateful tenant of Falmouth Housing Authority. And so I thought it would be a perfect opportunity for me to give back.
I appreciate that. That's a good answer. And questions from the board from Ms. Benz?
I think that, if I may, Mr. Chair, I think we, you know, just wanted to make sure that we knew the background of each tenant, just in that whether or not litigation, or if they were in good standing with the authority, just because some conflicts can come up if folks are appointed and then they have any issues that are currently pending. So I would just put that out there to just get feedback from each of the candidates, just so we're sure that we're not appointing someone who then is somehow disqualified because they're currently, you know, struggling with whatever the issue might be with the authority.
Okay, that's a good point. Thank you very much for that.
So far, so good. I'm in good standing.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you very much. We're not going to be able to make an appointment tonight. It's only one person we're looking for. Is that correct, Mr. Suso? I don't see that on here.
It is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, just one.
Okay. Is this time sensitive? Should we?
Well, I think the executive director has been encouraging that appointment to be made at your earliest convenience.
It's difficult. So there's only 2 folks here this evening, and we had 5 on the list. So it's a tough one. We'll have to discuss that amongst ourselves.
Certainly, I understand.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, bye-bye.
Next, we have Marie Vatour. Did I say that right? Welcome.
Yes, you did.
Good, I got lucky.
Thank you.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about what your motivation is to be on the board?
Sure. I'm a registered occupational therapist, and I've been on disability, and then now I'm retired, so I want to find a purpose. So this is a good opportunity because as an occupational therapist, I did home care, and many of the things that I did was evaluate the home situation and was it functional and safe for the individual to be there. So I think I have a lot of to offer as far as when it comes to housing, because I can, explain safety situations and make sure that the housing is proper for the individual and make it an individual fit, and make sure that individuals are able to function within their assigned home environment, and that's what I can offer.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Any questions from the board? Well, let's repeat Ms. English Braga's question about any issues with the current status with regard to the housing authority. Nothing going on.
No, not at all.
Great. Appreciate that. Sorry, we have to ask, but I guess it's an important question.
No, you have to do your duty.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I know we have your resume and it was very thorough, so thank you. I guess we'll
Welcome.
have to-
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Taylor?
I just have a question. If I heard Mr. Suso correctly, we've been asked to make an appointment at our earliest convenience. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. I do note that we have Bobby Richards, Executive Director, who is an attendee. So if the board wants to elevate her, she could make
That would be helpful to get a sense of the timeliness.
But my other question is, I'm going to assume, Mr. Suso, please correct me if I'm wrong, that all 6 candidates were given notice for tonight's meeting?
That's correct, they were.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I see Ms. Haynes coming on, I believe.
I'm on. I just keep losing connection.
Oh, welcome.
Hi, I'm a little odd because my computer has to be over. But I
Oh, I think we lost you again.
Mr. Chair, in the meantime, there is a note from Bobby Richards in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much. She does not have audio. It is correct that we're seeking an appointment as soon as possible, but we're also patient if more time is needed. Thank you for that, Ms. Richard. If I could, I guess I'd like to follow up to Ms. Richards, and maybe she can enter in the chat again. Is this appointment holding up any action by the board that would be timely? Can the board still function? Do you have a quorum?
Well, she sort of suggested that they're willing to be patient, so I think that's probably the best response. Oh, there we go.
Yep, she says, no, we are able to function and we do have a quorum. As you're aware, this issue of adding a tenant to the board has been more than 2 years in discussion. So we are excited. Yes, they're excited for the new person to be appointed when possible. What's the feeling of the board? Can we have a little discussion on whether or not we should move forward with only having interviewed two people and Ms. Haynes having a technical issue apparently with the video?
Well, we seem to have 2 good candidates, but in fairness, it seems like we ought to give the other applicants a chance to respond.
I would agree with that.
I agree. And it seems like there are a lot of technical difficulties tonight. This whole feed there's been a lot of freezing and it's been choppy. So I would want to make sure people, we hear from them, even if whether our next meeting is in person or if they're able to call in, that we, through Mr. Suso, do some outreach to make sure that they can participate. Not everybody's going to be able to have access to Zoom.
Right.
So I want to, they can call in. So I want to make sure we reach out and make sure that they understand that's an option and facilitate that.
And I will say, I would anticipate our next meeting would probably be in person unless conditions change.
Yeah, and the broadband services are very different from one place to another, and which provider that you happen to subscribe to.
Exactly. One thing that's important though is that this group that we're pointing to does meet via Zoom, so they will need to have Zoom capacity to be able to operate. I don't know how long that'll go on, but that's the current practice.
They can call in on a phone and participate in Zoom, but
Okay.
we don't have that. I think Ms. Richards is pointing out that that's not easily available, as it's not very clear how people were to do that for tonight's meeting. But I think let's make sure that's clear for whatever meeting we do next.
Okay.
Will do.
Okay, well, then I guess we're going to leave this to our next meeting because it seems a little unfair to go forward. So thanks for the two folks that were able to get with us, and then also thank to Kathleen for trying but having technical difficulties. We'll take this up at our next meeting. The next we have discussion and vote name change and review and discussion mission statement of Transportation Management Committee. Mr. Suso, did you want to?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'd sent a note to the board suggesting your consideration for a change in the naming of the committee to the Transportation Committee, perhaps, to avoid unnecessary confusion, which has arisen in individuals that have spoken to me and possibly others regarding the fact that this committee is advisory only, has no management authority, and changing the name accordingly in talking with town council would be more in character and in support of the sections of the Falmouth Town Charter that I advised the board about. So I would respectfully suggest you may wish to consider that, and also some discussion on the mission of the committee if you deem that appropriate.
So
from the board?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
So I guess what I would say is
Oops.
Sorry. I guess I'm less concerned about changing the name as I am with emphasizing 2 points, which are that committees are advisory to the board. They help us, they provide us information, make suggestions, and the board takes into account, sort of all broad range of factors, including, just everything across the board that we need to look at. And then we use that information and we move forward. Is that I think there is a need to emphasize, and frankly, I'll be very candid. I've heard it. I think other members of the board have heard it. Mr. Suso kind of alluded to it, but it's not coming directly from Mr. Suso. These are concerns that have been raised to me about the approach of this board in particular to some of the members of the staff of our town. And so to me, that's not about the name of a committee, but that is really about how people undertake the work that, and, I think we've seen it in some of our meetings where we've had presentations from this particular committee. And there are ways to be really strong advocates for the things that you care about in a way that is collaborative and solution oriented. And I don't think that is the message that always has come during those presentations. Frankly, some of them have seemed combative and denigrating of some of our staff. And I personally do not understand the value of that. Again, I think you can be critical in a constructive way that actually moves your agenda forward. And at the end of the day, that's how you're the best advocate for whatever committee you're on that you care about. There are some committees, I'll just highlight, solid waste is one of them, bikeways and pedestrians that have really pushed hard and have had, real concerns about parts of the management of our town in terms of policies, but have been able to really advance their objectives because of, I think, the way that they approach their advocacy. They certainly aren't, they're not trying to be cheerleaders. Their job isn't to be a cheerleader for Mr. Suso, for any member of the board. And they don't need to do that, but they present their concerns, their recommendations in a way that is really constructive and helpful. And so I'm happy to do, obviously, whatever this board does in terms of the name change, but to me, that is really just topical. The bigger issue is that we are part of a community that we should support each other. We can critique each other in a way that is helpful. And I hope that there are folks on this committee that are very strong advocates and care deeply for this community and have had years, far more years than I have, of service to this community. So I hope we just can get back to operating in that way, because for whatever reason, I think the messaging has gone slightly in a different direction. So sorry, that's my soapbox. But
well, as a liaison to this committee, I will say I attended their recent meeting, which was the one-year review. It was a little bit critical of town, inactivity on their initiatives, of course. But there was also a discussion amongst the committee about the interaction process. And they did kind of review themselves as well as review us and the whole interactive situation. And the chair has agreed to, try to be more engaging and more appropriate with addressing the issues. He offered to have somebody else take the chairmanship. The committee felt he was the most effective and appropriate chair. And I certainly agree with that. He's a very knowledgeable man, and nobody else was really prepared to take the chairmanship. But the chair did offer that in going forward, he's going to request assistance from that committee to help him moderate the tone in the presentation. And I think a couple of the committee members are going to work with the chair on the delivery, if you will. So I think that the issues have been addressed, and I hope that things are going to be on the improvement. And I made a commitment to that committee to improve my interaction with them and then try to help them expedite their initiatives a little more effectively. So I feel like we're in a better place than we were, a few months ago. Whether or not we need to make changes, I'll leave it up to the board to, for further comment. I just want to make my comment. Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
I think the name change makes some sense because it is somewhat misleading. They're not really empowered to manage the transportation in the town. They're empowered to basically look at the situation and provide advice and recommendations to us as the select board. So I think it does help to clarify. Language is never perfect, but if we can tweak it in that little bit of a way, I think it probably makes it clearer in the future.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Scott Price.
Excuse me. I would agree with Sam. I was just looking at the list of the committees and the way that the other ones are titled, like Affirmative Action Committee, Affordable Housing Committee, Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee. They all just say whatever they're working on and then committee. It seems that currently transportation management and then there's the Water Quality Management Committee are the only ones that have management in the title. So I would agree that if they're not to be doing management, then it would make sense to take that out of the name.
And would that be the case for the Water Quality Committee as well? I suspect it probably doesn't really matter to them what they call it. Their work will continue, I imagine. Mr. Suso, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, that's not on your agenda tonight to deal
Right.
with that committee. But if you'd like, I certainly can pick that up and review it and get back to the board. The one that had come to my attention was the one that I, respectfully recommended and talked to town council about.
Okay. Well, that was, yes, Ms. Taylor.
I just want to put my 2 cents in here. I agree with both Mr. Patterson and Ms. English Braga that I agree with changing the name. I think it does change sort of the look of the committee. And secondly, I agree really strongly with the comments of Ms. English Braga and the behavior that we need to be able to expect from any one of our committees. And I think we need to set an example for that. And I think that we need to let people know when they sort of step out of what's appropriate.
Okay, well, what's the will of the board today? Do we want to take up a broader discussion and consider whether or not any committee should have management in it? Or do we want to Post this one individually.
I think we need to stick to what was on our agenda.
Okay.
But I'd say that I think we can be even-handed, and I certainly agree with changing the name of the Water Quality Management Committee at a future meeting.
Okay.
We're doing some wordsmithing here to better communicate with people, and why not make it consistent?
All right then.
Mr. Chair, I think that Ed DeWitt, we're seeing in a chat that Ed DeWitt is asking to be recognized. Obviously, that's at the discretion of the chair.
I think that would be appropriate. Could we please promote Mr. DeWitt to speak? Welcome, Mr. DeWitt.
Good evening. I'm Ed DeWitt. I'm currently the chair of the Transportation Management Committee. The committee has not had an opportunity to review this agenda item. Consequently, I'm speaking only as an individual expressing my personal perspective. Most of the material before was about the committee operating outside of its mission statement. And that's what I primarily wanted to address this evening. First, I want to express how seriously the committee takes the mission statement approved by you to guide the committee. Ralph Herbst in particular has raised consideration of the mission statement several times during the first year of our meetings. Each time the committee has found us well inside the four corners of the mission statement. Secondly, I want to emphasize that the committee has never seen its role simply as a cheerleader for the town administration. There has been universal agreement among the committee that we need to investigate transportation practices and make recommendations that make the town a better place to live, work, and play. We have praised good work, like the adoption of complete streets. We have also identified lapses in transportation policy, administration, and fiscal execution. This is directly consistent with the mission statement that you gave us to review and analyze all aspects of the town's transportation system, all aspects. We have done this cooperatively with a broad reach of transportation experts and officials across the region and state. Within town government, I would like to single out Chair Brown, our liaison, Peter McGonerty, and Chief Dunn, all of whom have helped us understand the nuances of town government and local transportation. Our first report sent to you for consideration was about the Steamship Authority operation. This report was labeled a no-brainer by the Steamship Authority. The report was cited as an example of being outside our mission statement. Steamship Authority impacts on the Falmouth transportation system have been ongoing for a half century and become increasingly acute. During our follow-up, we discovered safety issues associated with stopped school buses being passed by Steamship Authority bound trucks. 600 trucks per day on a 9-mile stretch of 2-lane road is a critical transportation concern. Not able to stop for school buses is a frightening concern. The committee identified a number of problems with access to the downtown business district. These included parking, signage, connectivity, and access for pedestrians and bicyclists. We provided a detailed report. One of the conclusions of that report was that we had enough payment dedicated to parking in the downtown, and that better management turnover signage was the best option. We learned, for instance, that St. Barnabas had reached out to the town to allow employee parking as a measure of goodwill. Instead of paving over more of the downtown, of these no-cost or low-cost alternatives were recommended to be fully investigated. This is clearly consistent with the mission statement. The committee praised the adoption of complete streets as both visionary and game-changing, the new normal for town transportation. Because this policy change was so central to the town's transportation system, the committee believed a first-year analysis was an important step, as the mission statement prescribes, to analyze all aspects of transportation policy. We praised the parts of the policy that are working well, like training. We identified flaws with the implementation and coordination of the policy and made recommendations to improve the policy. We also recognize that there was misunderstanding of what complete streets meant by both the public and some within town government, particularly not understanding the role and responsibilities in carrying out your established policy. We look for better ways to fund complete streets. One of the tools we identified to potentially fund a more robust complete streets policy was through modernizing pavement management. Simply stated, modern pavement management involves extending the life of pavement, flattening the pavement deterioration curve by making small investments in good quality pavement with an assortment of modern treatment tools. Pavement management allows the community to double the length of time before a road requires major rebuilding. The quality of roads are consistently better and payback significant. In a Massachusetts town with fewer road miles than Falmouth, implementing a modern pavement management program raised the overall quality of roads, which has been characterized as between fair to poor or comparable with Falmouth to consistently good across the entire town. After 6 years, the savings amounted to $750,000 per year. That savings net from what the town was spending before implementation.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but I got to ask you, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just curious, are you planning to give us a whole year recap right now?
Well, I just wanted to make it clear that we take operating within the mission statement very serious. And all of the things that we have done, I believe, fall squarely within that mission statement. So in some ways, we are reviewing what we have done.
Okay, well, I don't think the board really was questioning the mission statement.
Well, I think if you read the memo submitted by the town manager, I think that was one of the things that was mentioned.
Okay, can we hear from Mr.
Finally,
Sousa first?
just let me make the point,
Okay.
because there was a mention of respect. Is it respectful to place this item on the agenda without the courtesy of advising the committee, inviting the committee, or providing an opportunity to review the item ahead? And with that, I'll finish.
Okay, well, I guess it was really a board discussion brought by Mr. Sousa. So Mr. Sousa, would you like to comment?
Certainly, if you'd like me to comment on the mission statement matter, I'd be happy to. I didn't know whether you wanted to deal with that recommendation on the name prior to that. If the board's going to pass on that, I can talk about mission statement.
Well, I think the board was kind of inclined to move on the name change and at a later time take up the issue of the name change of the Water Quality Management Committee. But if you'd like to address the mission statement question, since Mr. DeWitt is speaking to it, that'd be fine.
Okay, be happy to comment. Had several interactions with Chairman DeWitt and on different issues of the mission statement. And I understand that he's indicated that the committee self-determined that they were within the mission statement. But I'll give you a few examples, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that concern me. The committee self-determined to undertake a financial analysis of transportation. I do not believe that this board anticipated that when you approved a mission statement, that they would begin to undertake financial reviews and analyses because we have people that are highly qualified that do that as a matter of routine, but that has been undertaken. There was also a self-determination by the committee to direct a revised pavement management process and to make demands of the Public Works Director pursuant to their unilateral determination that they would undertake that role. I believe there was also a self-determination that the committee would conduct an evaluation of complete streets. I don't know that that was anticipated by this board when you adopted a mission statement. And finally, one other example of self-determination was the committee has determined to issue multiple reports and ask on several times during the year to present these reports to the select board. Now, in your mission statement, the board makes it very clear that there's to be a single comprehensive annual report from each committee to this board. That has not been the process which has been undertaken by this committee. So those are some examples, in my judgment, of variation from what I believe was your intent with a mission statement, as I understand it, and perhaps I am ill-advised or misinformed.
All right, and Mrs. English Braga? Oh, you just froze.
So, I think that this is a resurrected committee that we retooled the mission statement. And I think the members are passionate and are trying to kind of look at all of these issues, comprehensively. So I think that, again, I'm going to say that part of this is the role of this board, meaning the select board, to say, this isn't going to be on our agenda. We're not going to have a report, every month. We need to consolidate. Maybe it isn't annually. Maybe that doesn't work well. But even that's, I know that that's what the mission statement says. But part of it is this board to push back and say, you know what, we're not going to hear that report right now. And part of it is, again, the committee has taken on these issues to take a look at them. I think it needs to be clear, it's for all committees, that committees don't direct town staff. That is why they have a liaison on the board who they should go through. So if transportation analysis, it's not to, it's not Mr. DeWitt's responsibility or anybody else's to try and get in touch with Jen and direct her. That's not how it works. And it shouldn't be his job to do that. He should come to Doug, who's the liaison, and say, here's the questions that we have, and this is the information we're looking at. So I'm not as bothered about the things that they've wanted to sort of undertake or investigate, because frankly, at the end of the day, it's the job of this board to say, okay, that is outside the scope when they bring it to us, or that maybe isn't, we're not going to hear every month from your committee. That's this board's job. So we have a job that we're supposed to do as well, that we can't lay at the feet of Transportation Management Committee. But I think I go back again to the clarity of how communication goes. No committees are directing. I mean, this board doesn't direct town staff. We direct the town manager. The town manager directs the staff. It is not on this board, this board is not authorized to Jennifer and tell her to do something. We do that through our town manager, and that's how committees should also work. They work through their liaison, who can then work with to accomplish those goals. So I'm more concerned about clarifying that to not just this committee, but all committees, and taking on our own responsibility, which is to push back and to say, we have very full agendas. We can maybe hear from you, quarterly, or maybe, it says in the mission statement annually, maybe it's twice a year. So it's the role that we have to do. And again, I just go back to the messaging. And I think, it is very much about how there have been really great suggestions that have come out of this committee. Some of it is, again, process and messaging, and I would just leave it at that. So I'm less concerned about constricting their mission statement. It is what it is. We drafted it. If the committee goes astray in it, then this board's responsibility is to say that's beyond what we've asked you to do and act accordingly. I don't think we have to hammer it down and narrow it in. As long as the process is being followed in terms of interactions with staff. That's the piece that concerns me the most.
Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, I think we're really dealing with effective communication. And of course, you don't have to come before us during our regular meetings, the Transportation Committee. You can send us the information, because I'm open to information from any of the citizens in the town. And I take it in, and if I think that some priority needs to be established for any particular, if you will, mission statement, or a committee with a particular mission statement, I'm more than happy to advocate for a meeting that deals with a particular issue, which is timely and which requires us to kind of have in our strategic and even tactical planning. So I think we need maybe just to simply take a look and say, there are effective ways to communicate with us. And effective means that you're convincing us that this is important enough to make an agenda item for our upcoming select board meeting or some future meeting.
And I'll comment that I think the mission statement is pretty broad, and I'm not really concerned that they've taken up the initiative to look at these other issues. I know that pavement management is something that was unexpected on the part of staff, but at the same time, I don't think there's any harm in them looking into it and bringing it to us as a potential initiative. It might not happen overnight. It's a big change in operation, but it might be something that this board might like to consider. As far as the Steamship Authority, I agree with Mr. DeWitt, and he asked me this before taking it up because he did have advice from Mr. Suso that it might not be, in their wheelhouse. But my answer at the time was, how do you look at transportation in Falmouth and not notice the Steamship Authority? It's just too big of an item to miss. And as far as the other things, the complete streets, that's transportation. I mean, it might not have been expected for them to go so deeply into it, but at the same time, I think it fits. I don't see how you can say it doesn't. So other things I'd like to see the committee work on is like, can we bring train service back to North Falmouth and, stuff like that, bigger ideas. But that's what it is right now. I'm less concerned about the initiatives, and I'm glad they're taking the initiative. And it's up to the board whether or not those initiatives go forward or not. So, more information, the better, is my feeling.
I second your comments.
Thank you. Any more comments from the board? Mr. DeWitt, I'll give you another chance if you want to make any other points. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Ms. Scott Price, excuse me, let Ms. Scott Price speak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to reiterate the very beginning of Mr. Suso's memo, I guess this is, the concern about receiving disrespectful and uncivil interactions with the committee. And I just think that's a really important thing to point out, is that if we're going to work together, I think we need to be respectful of each other. And if there's these kinds of concerns that are brought up, they need to be discussed, dealt with in an appropriate way. So I understand we've gotten into the weeds of the name and the mission statement and whatnot, but I think the beginning of that is really important. And we don't at any point want any of us on the board or any of our town staff or any members of our community feeling like they're being disrespected. And so I think that we should take that pretty seriously.
Well said. That is the succinct way of summarizing the only thing that the piece that I'm primarily concerned about with this topic. Staff should never feel like they are, in a position where they don't they are feeling pressured or disrespected. And it may not, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but that's how it's coming off, because we've heard about it. He takes that to heart.
Okay. Well,
if I would I'd like to finish up with that. We have self-evaluated ourselves, as Mr. Brown pointed out, and we've made changes. So we know that we're not perfect, but I think we are really trying to make Falmouth a better place to work, to recreate, and to enjoy for everyone. And I would, say that there's only one person that I'm aware of that has had issues with our approach and request for information. And otherwise, we've been, I think, well supported and given good information in reasonable time. And, we've always said we're patient, and that programs like pavement management are going to take years to implement. But I think the potential savings to the town, if we could capture those same savings of $750,000 a year and have better roads at the same time, that's a good path to be moving forward on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeWitt. So I think I saw a little bit of support from the board for the name change.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we change the name of the committee to the Transportation Committee.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
Price second.
Okay. All right, then. Is there any other comment before we take a vote? All right. So all those in favor, Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
And Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
And Brown, aye. And with regard to the mission statement, if you guys want to comment first, you can go ahead.
I don't have a problem with the mission statement. I mean, language is always going to be subject to interpretation. And I think if we just get the message so that we understand the working relationship and how it's laid out in the charter, I think this current mission statement will work.
Okay. And I personally don't really want to change the mission statement. I appreciate that it's broad. It may reach into areas that we're not expecting, and it'll be up to us to decide when it's brought to us. Is this something that we want to pursue, or is it maybe something that we should advise them to leave that alone if somebody else is already handling it? I think, like I said before, the more information, the better, and we can decide what goes forward afterwards, unless other people feel differently. Ms. English Braga?
No, I concur with that. What I would say is, you know, I think Mr. DeWitt at the it stuck with me when he said, you know, we asked for information and we're willing to be patient. But that isn't really how it works. I mean, again, we want to make sure our committees have information. But what I've always said to my committees is, if you're going to reach out to a department head, copy the liaison on that email so that we're in the loop, and that liaison number one can help follow up. But also so that, you know, that department head they're not at odds wondering, am I supposed to engage directly? What's the chain of command? Because again, you know, department heads have a protocol, and just or tasks that we're asking department heads or staff to complete. You know, it shouldn't really work that way.
Well, I've kind of discouraged that myself, and I said, please just send that to me, and I'll send it to Mr. Suso.
That's fine too.
Ms. Taylor?
That was going to be my point, that I'm not sure that it's appropriate for the committees to be reaching out to department heads. And as a point of clarification, I would also ask or question the appropriateness of even board members reaching out to department heads.
I don't do it. Only if something's timely, I'll send an email to Mr. Suso, and occasionally I will copy to the interested person. But, you know, that's not my normal practice. Typically, I'll ask Mr. Suso for help, and any board member that
appropriate for us to be doing that. That's just come up a couple of times, and I just thought, wow, it doesn't seem right.
It's not.
Well, I think we hold our town manager, assistant town manager, responsible for how the town functions and operates, and they should be part of those conversations. So anytime I wanted, you know, a department head or a staff member in the town to actually be part of a discussion, so it's a give and take of information and perhaps a sharing of a perspective, I've always included basically the town manager and assistant town manager in that request, expecting them to be part of that discussion. And so I think that's the appropriate way for it. Then we can hold the town manager responsible for things that aren't getting done or aren't being done the way we think is in the best interest of the citizens of the town.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. I wasn't clear that when I have myself copied, I copy Julian or Peter so that everyone is in the loop and that department head knows that Julian and Peter have seen whatever the question is or the concern is.
And really the same goes for us as for what we're advising to a committee. We shouldn't be contacting department heads and trying to integrate ourselves into the professional staff, because it's really not our role.
Agreed.
And any final thoughts, Mr. Suso, on the discussion?
Only thank you to the board for your dialogue. A few of the comments made, I think the board is aware. We're not fully based on information that's been made available to you, but I do appreciate the opportunity to discuss that, and thank you for your responsiveness. We look forward to productive relationships going forward.
Thank you. Okay, the next thing we have is discuss and vote designee from the select board member to serve on the community fiber working group. Is there a person on this board that is interested to be the designee to be on that fiber working group?
I would be happy to serve in that capacity if that's the choice of the board. I have extensive technical background in communication and digital communication and services. I've certainly been part of the EDIC's efforts to support looking at a competitive broadband option for the citizens of the town. And so I think it's just a matter of trying to figure out if we were to invite, I guess they're going to call it overbuilders to come into the town, they're going to have to interface with the town itself. And it's that interface and information and permitting and everything, that process needs to get defined. And I think that I would be happy to serve in that capacity.
Well, I was hoping you'd say that. Thank you very much.
I would move to appoint Sam Patterson for that position.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, Mr. Patterson?
Willing.
Okay. I'll take that as a yes. And Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
And Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
And Brown, aye. Thank you, Sam. We appreciate that. And thanks to the Falmouth Net group for moving forward. They're putting Facebook posts, looking for surveys, and people, they are really just so motivated. It's great. I'm really happy about it. Next is discuss draft select board agenda agenda for the August 26th public meeting on proposed joint base Cape Cod machine gun range. The reason I asked to put this on was because there's been discussion and requests from many Falmouth residents that they want to present at the meeting. And I wanted the board to discuss whether a presentation by residents is actually kind of the appropriate venue, or do we want to keep it to presentation by the joint base staff of what their project is and have the community ask questions and make comments? Yes, Ms. English Braga.
Well, I guess I would say, I think I was thinking about this in the way that we have, excuse me, at town meeting. You know, somebody could be allowed to sort of do an opposition as a bit of a presentation, right? Or offering, you know, the other side, another view in a presentation format, because I'm guessing what is being requested is to have a more formal, you know, with some slides type of presentation, or offer different information from Joint Base Cape Cod's presentation. So I was thinking about it as, you know, are we going to allow something that's more formalized like that rather than just a series of individuals coming up and making comments? So I'm in favor of there being some way, and this board has to organize what that looks like, for there to be maybe, you know, not half an hour long, not an hour long, but some kind of succinct, you know, ability to present data or slides, because I think that's what's really being asked.
Okay. And other comments, Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, I'd like to have a delineation or somebody to explain the decision tree, if you will, on whether that facility goes on joint base type. Is this a state decision? Is it a federal decision? Where's the authority lie that actually allows that to happen? Because, you know, we can complain as much as we want, but if the authority isn't within the political forces that we have influence over, then we're just complaining. But I think there's got to be some sort of an authority tree, if you will, that will tell us whether there's any chance for us to influence the outcome.
Well, the last time this was proposed, I think it was 1995, and Governor Cellucci voted against, vetoed the idea. And I don't know if there was an environmental management commission back then, but that's what we have now. And they will have the final say as far as overview for now. But I do think it's the governor that will decide in the end. Am I right about that, Mr. Suso?
That would be my guess as well.
Will
We'll verify that.
Will their representative, will Governor Baker's representative be present at this meeting?
I don't think we've invited them. We could still probably ask if anybody would come to explain that. Would you think that would be possible, Mr. Suso?
Oh, we can certainly invite them and see if they'd like to join us.
Anybody, whether it's from the governor's office or anyone in any level of government, could explain that level of authority.
We've tried to invite our legislative representatives. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Any confirmations from those folks?
I do not have any confirmations as yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think the decision is in our hands. So, I mean, having a meeting just to navel gaze and complain or raise objections is going to do any good whatsoever. Who are the decision makers? And
well,
that's who I want to be part of this deliberation.
Okay, right. Well, it'll help me get more information where I can ask pointed questions and make my own comments. Ms. Scott-Price?
Thought the point of this was that we've had a lot of people coming in opposition, but we had never had a chance to actually hear from the base themselves. So we're the base a chance to tell us essentially their side of the story. And I think that even if our legislative representatives can't be there, we still wanted to have that so that we had all the information to be able to say, if we wanted to put out a statement like they did in Mashpee or Sandwich saying that we as a board were for or against it. But I think that's what the people want us to do. They want us to come up with something. So I understand what Sam is saying about having representatives there, but I think in either case, it's important for us to do this. And to Megan's point about having an opportunity for people to present the information that they have gathered, because we've gotten that very piecemeal over the last few select board meetings. And so I'm not sure if limiting public comment to 3 minutes per person is going to get us any further along than the piecemeal we already have. But at the same time, I don't want to make this a 3-hour meeting. So.
Well, I think it's probably going to be a 3-hour meeting at least. And I think we're going to start at 6. Is that what we agreed on?
Yes.
Right.
Tentatively, we were looking at 6 to 8 p.m. We can go to 9 if you prefer that.
My understanding, Mr. Chair, the feedback that I've had from people in the community is that they want it to be balanced. In other words, if we're going to allow JBCC to do somewhat of a presentation, then there's another group in opposition in town comprised of a bunch of smaller groups that want to present their side. And so my thought is that if we're going to let them present, it has to be balanced for both sides. I don't think it's fair to just let JBCC do their sort of presentation and then just ask questions from the public. I don't see that as balanced.
Okay.
So, and I think it sort of challenges the person that might be in opposition to frame their presentation in a way that's much more efficient and effective, quite honestly, rather than having people get up and repeat the same thing over and over and over.
Okay.
I just think we have to be tight on time. You know, if we give JBCC a half an hour and then we give the other side a half an hour, we're just going to have to hold to that so that then the public still has opportunities to ask questions.
Okay.
I would agree with all that.
Okay. So is that the will of the board? We'll give 30 minutes to the Joint Base Cape Cod, 30 minutes to an organized group of folks that want to, maybe there'll be 2-3 groups and they'll go 10 minutes each, or I don't know how we'll exactly.
It's going to be one group.
I think there'll be one group.
I think there'll be one group, and it's a consortium of individuals and other groups.
And
Okay.
yes, it's comprised of other smaller groups that are in other pockets of opposition, but I think they can present all together as one.
Okay. All right.
So,
So
Mr.
is that,
Chairman, may I ask, are we talking about changing the agenda to be 30 minutes for Joint Base Cape Cod and 30 minutes for Counterpoint from another organization, and then questions and comments from the audience? Is that what we're talking about?
sounds like that's where we're headed.
Okay.
And I would also like them to submit presentation materials so that we can take it away and review it ourselves if we think that there's a statement that we want to make from that. And again, I think it's really asking them to be more organized and effective in their communication.
And succinct. We need to hold them to it. They need to be succinct. They have a half an hour to sort of make their pitch, and then we hear from the other side, and then we have an hour for questions.
Okay,
But it's
Mr.
up to
Johnson,
us
stop.
to manage it.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to offer a comment very much along the same lines as Dr. Taylor and Mr. Patterson, which is to be succinct, and perhaps 30 minutes is really more than is needed by each side. Maybe 20 minutes is ample. Just a thought.
Ms. English-Braga?
I would only say that I have seen that JBCC, and I think Doug and Julian probably have, and it's like 2 hours or an hour and a half. So, you know, I think we want to let them know well in advance if they're going to, it can be streamlined. But I would just say, if that's the will of this board, that we should communicate that tomorrow, because they have a very packaged presentation already done, and this is going to require something different, which is fine. I think it's appropriate to do that and leave the bulk of the time to questions from the community.
Agreed. And I agree with Mr. Johnson's job that if they can do something in 20 minutes, I think that's great. Gives more time to the public, and it forces them to present the most important highlights.
And do it in a more convincing way, because they're going to lose their audience if they go on for an hour.
Exactly. Let alone 2.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up.
Okay.
Who or what entity do we want to contact for this counterpoint?
Well, the primary people we've been hearing from are Sandy Feynman Silva and Rosemary Drieger Carey, and I think Rosemary's group, the 350 group, has a couple hundred members.
Yep.
So I would contact those 2 ladies first, and if anybody on the board has suggestions for other folks to include.
I would reach out to Rosemary and let her assemble her group. I think she works with enough people involved in that she would be able to put that together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Sam.
is there a representative from the Mashpee group that might be able to add their perspective? I mean, I think there's some benefit for us to hear the perspective of some other opposition group up on the Cape.
I think Rosemary might have
just that we'll advertise it.
Regional.
Well, good. Maybe that does it then.
I don't think we need to solicit opposition.
No, but I think if their voice is from a larger regional perspective, that's helpful.
I think what we'll do, I'll maybe send an email to Bill Huff and remind him of the date, and also ask that maybe he could put it in the Mashpee and Sandwich papers as well, in case folks from other towns want to come and hear the presentation, because I don't think they've had a chance to hear it.
Yeah, well, that's not what I was intending to include, to broaden the group of people listening to this presentation. What I was just looking for is if there's a perspective outside of Falmouth that's of value to us, because we're so, buried in the mire of the thing.
Well, I'm a little anxious about that because Mashpee's already issued a letter of opposition, and I don't know if Sandwich has, but I'm not sure. So they're kind of predisposed to their position. And
But what's the rationale? That's the only thing. I want to make sure that if there's a convincing rationale, that it's part of this discussion, you know.
Okay.
That's the only reason for me to think that more regionally to perspective.
This will get press and those folks can attend. I mean, you know, the folks that Mark Forrest kind of represents who've written really great op-eds, you know, they may choose to attend. They wouldn't necessarily make a presentation, but might ask questions or make a comment. I think if we open it up to too many presentations, we cut into the time for the questions and public comment.
Right.
Agreed.
So, yes, Mr. Suso?
Just to recap then, Mr. Chair, if I may, we'll talk about a presentation from Enjoy Base Cape Cod, an edited, shortened presentation. And then I'll reach out to Rosemary Carey, asking that she'll give a counterpoint presentation, and then we'll have the questions and comments from the audience. And our intention would be, this is a forum of the select board, that you would be, the select board members would be on the stage, and also give JBC the opportunity to be up there to make their presentation, and Rosemary Carey's group can follow them, and then comments, and similar to forums we've held at the high school auditorium in the past.
Okay, are we all in agreement on the 20-minute presentation?
May I say 20 to 30 minutes, just to give them?
Oh, no, just, you got to make it the same.
I think we just say 20. They'll go a minute or two over anyway.
Okay.
But again, it's up to us to stick to it. And just
this?
remind them, give them a warning, you've got, 5 minutes left or whatever. Because I do want to afford the public a fair amount of opportunity to ask questions as well.
What if Mr. Suso reaches out to Joint Base Cape Cod and they feel like it's really important after, all this time we've been waiting, if they feel like it's really important that they get 30 minutes, will we maybe reconsider adjusting our plans and have 30 minutes for counterpoint?
Sure, 30 minutes is fine to me.
So that's why I think
but not an hour.
No, but I think we give Mr. Suso that latitude of 20 to 30, and whatever is determined to be, we'll use the same amount of time for the other folks.
Right.
Will do.
Okay. Okay, I guess that's it for that discussion, right? No vote needed?
No, we just had a consensus. That's what we want to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we want to review select board liaison assignments. I didn't really intend to review the whole thing over. The idea was that it occurred to me when the fire station committee was first meeting that we hadn't appointed anybody, and I was a little busy that evening and I didn't get to go. I kind of wanted to, but I guess we should decide whether or not we feel like we need a liaison, and if we do, who would like to do it?
Mr. Chair, am I correct in remembering that Mr. Suso is on that committee or overseeing that committee?
I'm staff support for the committee. I am the fire chief, and I convened the first meeting, and I'm intending to be there as a regular, yes.
So I'm wondering if it's redundant for there to be a select board member on that committee.
Okay.
I think we've had sort of building committees for various large projects in the town, and we've always included a select board member. The citizens have a different perspective sometimes from staff. So I think it's an important representation. You just put me on one though, so I think my plate is kind of full.
Okay.
Do we have one for the senior center? I don't think
we did not.
We're just getting regular reports.
That's true.
We didn't have one, but I attended the first several until I realized that they were just so on the ball that I just didn't need to bother them.
I guess my feeling would be we don't need to assign someone. If a board member wants to go, they can go. And I think we're hearing from staff and that. So if there's some concerns that are raised, I think then we can act accordingly. But we picked I think a very strong group of people, And that's why we did that. You know, these folks all have expertise or passion or particular focus on the subject matter.
Okay.
So I'd be okay leaving it as is with, obviously there's no, there's no restraint from one of us going to a meeting if we feel like we want to pop in.
Okay, and what was the other one, Mr. Suso, that you mentioned earlier that we had not?
Well, that was the fiber meeting that you've assigned.
Oh,
Sam.
right, okay.
Yep. Fiber working group.
Okay, then. And does anybody have any conflicts or issues with their current liaison assignments that needs to trade? Okay, very good. Okay, minutes of meetings. Anybody have any comments or questions or corrections?
We only have the executive session of July 12th, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm more than happy to move approval. Is there a reason for us to withhold this from public access at this point?
Mr. Suso, can you comment on that?
Double check that. Let's see.
This has to do with the settlement with Patrol Officer Josh Oliver.
I don't think there's any need to withhold that.
Okay, well, with that, I move approval of the executive session minutes of Monday, July 12th, 2021.
Is there a second?
And release for public access. Sorry.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Price, aye.
And Brown, aye. Thank you.
Can we just get Frank to just double check to make sure everything is done on that so that we can release it?
Happy to do that.
If we're still negotiating, we shouldn't.
That's why we didn't get an update on where the process went, so I just want to make sure that we get weigh in.
So we'll release contingent on town council's concurrence, if that's agreeable.
Yes.
That's my motion.
Thank you.
And individual select board members' reports. Anybody have anything to share? Yes, Ms. Scott Price?
This is kind of fun. Last year, one of my former students and I wrote a grant to the Woods Hole Sea Grant to support bringing back some of my former PEP students to do what we call a PEP 2 summer, where they would come back and instead of being students, do research for the entire summer. And part of that was a collaboration also with Falmouth Public Schools. And so we partnered each of my 5 researchers this summer with a teacher from Falmouth Public Schools to work on some sort of project. So it ranged from a website where teachers could go and gather information that they wanted to use in their classroom about sea turtles and corals, to someone else who made a like an interactive thing where a diver has gone down and taken video, and each student in the classroom gets a fish that they have to identify. And so they have to watch the video as if they're a diver and count how many fish and describe them. So it was a lot of really cool projects that came out of that. And so my PEP 2s presented last week, and I got a lot of really good feedback from the public school teachers about how that went. And so I'm looking forward to finding more money to bring more of them back next year and continue that collaboration.
Amazing.
You know, that spurs me to something I forgot I did a few weeks ago was go to the Woods Hole Science School, which I did last year as well, and talk to kids about coastal resiliency and the differences in attitudes regarding, you know, some people want to preserve it and elevate the roadways, and other people just say, let nature take its course. So it was very interesting. And the kids had a lot of great questions. It was a very interesting conversation. So who else has something to share?
I'd like to request at least 2 items to come up on future agendas in particularly timely fashion. You know, we just received communication from our town council, Frank Duffy, on the opioid settlement. I'd sort of like to have, you know, that be a topic of one of our meetings. And the other one are the 3 articles that the Affordable Housing Committee's working group put together on funding affordable housing.
Right. And I'd like to have a discussion about the proposed budget line item on the complete streets. We've got that from two groups, the Transportation Committee as well as the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee. And so I think it's a kind of a symbolic move to create a line item for complete streets, and two of our committees feel like it's important, so I think we should discuss it. Yes, Mr. Sousa.
Happy to discuss that, Mr. Chairman. One of the things to remember about complete streets is the way it's approached is on a project basis.
Right.
It's not like setting aside 100,000 or 200,000 and you do some complete streets. It's project specific. And for instance, Peter McConerty is working on Catherine Lee Bates Road now on an improvement. It happens to be, part of it is the Shiverix Pond, which I was going to mention briefly. But ultimately, that entire segment of roadway would be reconstructed, again, with complete streets in mind. So it isn't as simple as just setting aside some operating money, for instance, for complete streets, because it needs to be tied to a specific, and in most cases, a major capital project to be able to do it properly. So I just want to give that background. It's not just about putting some money in a line item that gets it done. But we're happy to talk about that.
Okay. Anybody else? Is there any other reports?
Terrible
Okay.
connection, so I'm not going to make you suffer.
All right. Well, I'm just going to mention a couple of things from the Beach Committee. They have been discussing wage increases, and Mr. Suso did remind me that typically wages are reviewed each year, and there is some ability to adjust and be flexible, but there's nonetheless, they're going to recommend to us what they think, you know, their view on it. So we're going to hear from that pretty soon. And there's been a lot of trash piling up at the beaches, and it's been tough to keep up. So that's another concern that has been raised, and I've sent emails to Mr. Suso, and he's addressed it as best as can be with, you know, limited staff that we have, but that's another concern that they've been bringing up. And let's see, we did have that meeting. We already talked about the meeting with the SSA on the bikeway, but we did get another note from the bikeway that very important that we advocate for the 10-foot width of the bikeway to be maintained through the parking area. And that was the consensus that everybody mentioned, myself and town engineering staff at that meeting, that the 10-foot width is very important. The biggest item on the assembly meeting this week was the supplemental budget request for $170,000 to fund the police training academy deficit. And there's been a lot of questions from the assembly members, and we were going to discuss it last week, but the professional staff realized that they would maybe have to be a little bit more prepared. So we're going to talk about that more in depth at our next meeting, because it's a rare, unexpected exceedance. So that's it for me for report today. Are there any more comments from the board?
Maybe just a question. Do you expect that we're going to be doing Zoom meetings for the foreseeable future?
Not exactly. We can talk about that right now if you'd like. I was thinking maybe I was overdoing it here tonight with the Zoom, and it made it difficult for applicants to join with our interview process. What's the feeling of the board? I'll be happy to take a poll amongst the board and see how people feel about the Zoom versus in person.
Well, I don't think it's going to hurt anything in the long run that we come back on those committee assignments. But personally, with the Delta being as contagious as it is, I was happy that you chose to be Zoom, because the idea of filling up that selectmen's meeting room with a lot of people was not comfortable for me.
Okay. Ms. English-Braga?
I agree. I have a child at home who's only 5, so she can't get the vaccine. She is high risk because of some of her health issues. So I do really appreciate it. I'll obviously do whatever the board chooses to do, but that space does feel small when everyone is in there.
Okay. Ms. Price?
I have no preference. I will follow the the will of the board.
Okay, and Ms. Taylor? Oh,
I
Mr.
could go
Suso,
with-
did you? I'm sorry.
I'll defer to Dr. Taylor.
Okay, thank you.
I could go either way. I tend to lean towards being overcautious. So I was actually happy that you called this as a Zoom as well. But I agree with Audrey. I can go either way.
And I too am indifferent. I don't feel particularly vulnerable, and I don't have any old folks or young kids around here. So I would be happy to defer to Sam and Megan with the stay with the Zoom if there's no objection to that. Mr. Suso?
One of the things you're going to need to determine pretty quickly, you've got a meeting coming up on the 26th. If that's not going to be in person, we need to change our approach very quickly.
Well, we had said it would be in person. It's a much larger venue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with meeting in the auditorium at very large volume.
And they have an HVAC system that is
It's upgraded.
appropriate. I don't know that town hall, I have some improvements, but I don't know that space can accommodate that type of airflow. I really don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to assure the board, we have a lot of upgrades that have occurred at town hall. We have supplemental air cleaners throughout town hall. That's been part of our COVID approach, but certainly respect whatever direction the board wants to go on any of that.
Well, I think it's more the transitions in and out of the room, when you got people moving in.
Right.
It only takes, with this very contagious variant, somebody sneezes in a line of people, and next thing you know, somebody else is going to be contracted. I'm looking at it from a public safety perspective, not necessarily from my own personal safety.
Well, do we want to put out a requirement that people wear masks during that meeting at the high school?
That really falls within the CDC guidelines.
Okay.
I would personally support wearing a mask, but I understand following CDC guidelines or, whatever Scott McGann suggests.
Maybe we could say that we request that you wear a mask.
As a reminder, your last in-person meeting, people were required to wear masks in the room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Only to take them off when they spoke at the microphone.
Right.
So you've consistently taken that position under the mask advisory. So that would be consistent with what you've done in the recent past.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Any more comments on that? Okay, so it sounds like we'll stay with Zoom for the next meeting, and we will go with the masks at the high school. And Mr. Suso, I guess we're ready to hear your report for the week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just an update. As the board is aware, we've opened the municipal leased off-street parking area off Catherine Leeds Bates Road with approximately 30 spaces. We have also installed, and my thanks to Public Works for their extraordinary work, wayfinding signs. And by my personal observation, we've been adding 1 to 2 cars parked there each day during the time when I have walked by. So we're pleased to see that, because we know that that transition does not happen overnight in terms of public awareness, even with the publicity that we've gotten out. Also, Public Works is under construction for the Shivricks Pond walkway improvement that will connect from Mullenhall School to Lawrence School. That has been discussed for some time. We're pleased that is underway. And if all goes as well as we hope, the target is to have that construction concluded prior to the onset of school here after Labor Day. That is part of the one piece of the Shivricks Pond pathway project. And as I've noted earlier, it's part of a larger segment of roadway improvements all along Catherine Lee Bates Road that Public Works is working on in that complete streets mindset. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I think the board wants to make a determination about whether your intentions on your next meeting, be that August 23rd or August 30th.
Well, I asked Mr. Suso to poll the board, and we're meeting on the 26th. So we could either meet on the 23rd or the 30th. I was hoping we could do the 30th because I'll be camping on the 23rd. But Ms. Taylor could certainly run the meeting if it's not convenient for others to be on the 30th. Yes, Ms. Cuprice?
I have no preference.
Okay, great.
Same here.
So if it's okay, then we'll go with the 30th, if that's
Sounds good.
causing any problems. Excellent.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Taylor, I.
Ms. English Braga?
English Braga, aye.
Ms. Scott Price?
Scott Price, aye.
And Brown, aye. Thank you all.
Good job, Chair. You're almost dead on with the timeline, so